No, you can
No.
speak.
All right,
I'm going to speak about that anyway.
okay.
Good evening. I'm going to reopen the Board of Selectmen's meeting for September 13, 2021. Eric, can I borrow your agenda?
Oh, the agenda.
We started tonight's meeting in executive session where there was two topics. One was related to approving executive session minutes, which the board did. We voted those minutes. We will not be releasing all of those minutes because some of them are pertaining to a lawsuit that we're involved in. Contract negotiations, we went over time, and we recessed, and we will reconvene the executive session after this meeting. Before I get started in opening the meeting, Board of Health had a meeting where they initiated the wearing of masks in public meetings again. They also left it open to the chairman to decide if you have to or if you don't have to. And what I would say is, if we can maintain social distancing and people are comfortable, you do not have to put them on. I'm going to say the same for the town administrator and the board. We've had two extremely busy meetings in this room which initiated the conversation with the Board of Health, whereas this room was chock full from center to both sides. And there was concern from the health director that we should initiate the mask mandate again. So it's not a mandate, and if you feel uncomfortable and can't get 6 feet away from people, please tell me now, and we will make a provision or we will have everyone put their masks on. With that said, will you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public comment and announcement. And Joe, I will start with you on the single-use plastic bottle bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, and good evening to members of the board and the public assembled. And first, let me apologize for my absence last week. In the words of the Three Stooges, I had about a week back. Thank you. That was my best joke. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as you know, a citizen petition article was established at the annual town meeting of 2020. That, of course, was the September 2020 COVID-19 impacted town meeting. Within that, there was a there were two articles. There was a environmental hazards bylaw that was created in 2019. It was amended by citizen petition in 2020. And the amendment in 2020, under Chapter 125 of our bylaws, is known as Article 2, which is commercial single-use plastic water bottles. And it indicates that effective on September 1st, 2021, it shall be unlawful to sell non-carbonated, unflavored drinking water in single-use plastic bottles of less than 1 gallon in the town of Harwich. Under definitions, it talks that single-use plastic bottle is a beverage container made from any type of plastic resin. There are exemptions that relate to emergency management, certain county, state, and local officials, and unfortunately requires enforcement of this by the town administrator. It has a standard enforcement non-criminal disposition table, and that is to say that the first violation requires a written warning, second violation requires a $150 fine, and third and subsequent violations a $300 fine. In light of that, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and with the significant amount of outreach that we had been getting, I had drafted an open letter to the community dated on September 1st, 2021, but released before then. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I'd like to read that into the record if I could. To whom it may concern, the single-use plastic bottle bylaw became effective on September 1st, 2021. This citizen-initiated bylaw was adopted in an effort to reduce plastic waste and therefore promote environmental health in our community. Having said that, the administration office recognizes that this bylaw may have a detrimental impact on the economic health of businesses that rely on this product to support their livelihoods. In addition, this unfunded mandate requires staff time which we currently cannot spare. In response to the business and citizen inquiries regarding the process by which this bylaw will be handled, the town will utilize an educational approach that will inform businesses of the bylaw and the reasons behind it. This approach will be by way of electronic communications to commercial permit holders and complaint-driven on-site inspections by health department staff. This adjustment period will allow both the town and the business community to assess the impacts of this bylaw. In the meantime, businesses are expected to comply with the bylaw. As town administrator, however, I am contemplating an amendment to the bylaw to be presented at the annual town meeting, and of course, that would be in the spring of 2022. Sincerely, Joseph Powers. So the town did not create this bylaw. The town is beholden to this bylaw. It went through a proper process. It was approved by town meeting. It was vetted by the Attorney General's office, and therefore, it is the law of our land. However, given all the confusion around it, the town does have the right through your agent as me of administrator to do that research, to find out, what impact it's having, and if necessary, perhaps come back to this board to recommend changes or amendments to that bylaw.
Thank you, Joe. Comments from the board? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get what you're saying, except the majority of the board actually supported it also. I mean, it was by no means unanimous, but it wasn't absent any support in governance.
Thank you. I didn't mean to suggest that it did.
I just want to get that out there. It was like the governance did support it in a split vote, and be hard to tell, if you're going to be looking at economic impact, I'd suggest you look at the economic impact of the fact that when we recycle plastic, we actually are paying to do it. We're not getting money back. We're paying to send plastic out. So that's an economic impact also.
Mary?
I get that it's controversial, but I guess I think with all environmental things, you have to start somewhere. And I thought it was a good start. There are other ways water can be carted around, and even some disposable things that are not plastic. So I'm good with the bylaw or whatever. Bylaw, is that the right word?
Correct. Yep.
Larry?
Yeah, I was one of the ones that had some concerns. I always like volunteer educational rather than mandatory. But as bylaw was passed by the town, it is what it is, and so I'm okay. We move ahead.
Okay. Joe?
And thank you. The comment earlier about distributing. So I do want to make it clear, and that's one of the concerns I have about the bylaw, is that it's unusual for a bylaw to be created in this manner without input from our bylaw charter review committee and other agencies that could have weighed in on some of the bureaucratic but necessary components. For example, this bans the sale of single-use plastic water bottles. It does not ban the use, it does not ban the distribution, it does not ban the transportation of it. And so there are a number of loopholes, if you will. So, however, my understanding again is that it went through the process that it needs to go through. That is, it was debated at town meeting, it was adopted, it was vetted by the Attorney General's office. It is the law of the land. We in administration will be listening to the complaints that we've gotten on both sides, if you will, those that support it and those that oppose it, and see if there are ways to refine it to make sure that this is a functioning law that can be done. And last but not least, removing the administrator as the agent of it, which is highly unusual, and placing that with a regulatory authority within town.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else for public comment and announcement?
Mark Kelleher, West Harwich. I spoke to some members of the Finance Committee, and I know the board is working on this, on retiring that $6.5 million debt of back taxes. I just want to emphasize, I think, how important it is to have benchmarks and measurements so that it can be reported on a regular basis, maybe by the town administrator, so we can see the progress we're making. I think it's important because there is no housing out there for working families in town. I've been going door to door, and I hear that constantly. And I think the advantage of having benchmarks and measurements, we can really push retiring that debt down and fund the housing trust fund, which I think is important to use the land we just bought out on 124. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clear up any misconceptions, at our last meeting when we discussed this, the board is looking for benchmarks and as well as a policy. We are now waiting for proposals from attorneys and title examiners. So more to come soon, but we are certainly not sleeping on this one. Public comment announcement?
Jamie Goodwin, Channel 18 station manager. Last week, the station started streaming on Roku devices. We set our station to start streaming last week. You can also watch back episodes of Selectmen's meetings, any other meetings that you're interested in, so it functions like an on-demand service. The instructions on how to download that app are on the town's website on the homepage. Next week, we will start streaming on Apple TV devices, and we're aiming to stream to YouTube Live by the end of the calendar year.
Great.
Thank
Thank you, Jamie.
Good evening, Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber. I just want to have a few announcements. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank my partner in planning yesterday's very successful parade, Fire Chief Dave LeBlanc. Once we knew last year we were able to move forward with the parade, I reached out and asked the chief. I said, not sure. On the other end, I'm hearing some silence, and I said, I'm not sure, but I think he's not sure what he just said yes to. And we both agreed we were going to do the parade, and it was a wonderful community event yesterday. Retired Fire Chief Norm Clark was the marshal, and we had representation from all 7 villages. We had our 2 small libraries. The Brooks Library, unfortunately, was not able to join us, but we had Chase Library and the Harwich Port Library, as well as fire trucks from all over the Cape, and a very wonderful Marine color guard. So thank you to all of them, as well as everyone that lined the route. Second, this weekend, I'm sure Ed's going to get up behind me and remind everyone, is Cranberry Festival weekend with wonderful crafters, incredible music, and great food. Plus, let's not forget the fireworks on Saturday night at 8. My last announcement is on the back table. I put some flyers about this. The Buds Mini Golf co-owner, Swavi Yosef, is putting on a fundraiser, and the Chamber is also a partner in this. 100% of the proceeds will benefit the Harwich First Responders as well as Children's Hospital, Boston's Children's Hospital. It's Saturday, September 25th, and starts at 9:30 a.m. And that's all for tonight.
Cindy, would you just tell the public the best place to park and view the fireworks and where they are?
So, I cannot tell you where they go off, but I can tell you, you can watch them comfortably on the front lawn of the high school, or as well, probably nicely, you want to grab dinner, listen to all the great music, and then come quietly over across the street. But they're right there.
Thank you.
May I address the bottle?
You can just state your name, name
Okay.
for the record.
Yes, my name is Bonnie Bridges. I live in South Harwich. I'm a co-filer of the bylaw, the bottle, plastic bottle ban, and a member of Sustainable Practices, a Cape Cod nonprofit. At the Fall Town Meeting on September 26th, the voters of Harwich passed the commercial single-use plastic water bottle ban bylaw, banning the purchase and sale of single-use plastic water bottles. The bylaw was scheduled to go into effect almost 1 year later. We had 1 year to plan and prepare. Many of our retail stores, including Shaw's and Stop and Shop, now display signs explaining why the single-use plastic water bottles are not available. Now most people are aware of the detrimental effects of plastic and are willing to forego convenience for helping our environment and ultimately our own health. The issue isn't just about plastic, rather the life cycle of plastic, from production to consumption to disposal. This bylaw actually enhances the value of our town. I hope Harwich will comply with enforcing this bylaw and respecting the will of our citizens. Many are watching us. Let us be the example. And there are 9 other towns who have passed this bylaw. And I don't know how many of you saw the article today in the Cape Cod Times, but it was very hopeful about plastic and about how the retailers were accepting it. They were managed. Sometimes there were problems, but they were able to overcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Well, Cindy, this is Ed McManus. Cindy stole most of my thunder. Yes, I'm here to talk about the festival weekend. Like she said, we'll be having great crafters, very good music, delicious food vendors, and thirst-quenching beverages to be sold. One of the things that the committee has decided, given some of the concerns that the Board of Health have been discussing, is we're going to be posting signs asking people that if they have not been vaccinated, that they please wear a mask, especially in the crowded areas, like out amongst the craft tents and also under the music tent where it tends to get very crowded. And we, obviously aren't going to be escorting people off the grounds if they don't. We just are hoping people of goodwill will follow the recommendation. But nonetheless, it should be a good time. We've been watching the weather. It's been going from rain to sun to rain to sun. It seems to be it's going to hold sun for the weekend, so we're expecting a good time, and we urge everyone to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment announcement?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Thank you. This was a late notice that we received this evening from Mass Department of Transportation. They're alerting the town to 3 asphalt pavement repair and improvement projects that they will begin work on next Monday, September 20th. They are expecting to operate throughout the business day, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The description of traffic management is that there'll be lane shifts or alternating one-way traffic control by police details, and they're expected to all occur on that one day, September 20th, weather permitting. The locations are all on Route 28. There's one where there's work in front of 710 Main Street, in front of 825 Main Street, and West Harwich at 236 Main Street. The notice that we got will be placed on the town's website tomorrow, so we just wanted to alert the public that next Monday, the 20th, there could be some traffic impacts along Route 28.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to the public hearing. There'll be a possible vote to approve Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 12, General On-Premise Seasonal Wine and Malt Liquor License for Ashwood Food Services, Incorporated, DBA Jake's at the Harbor, located 715A, Route 28, Harwich Port. We're going to open the public hearing by reading the notice.
Which Mary is scrolling to get up. Notice of public hearing, Town of Harwich Board of Selectmen application for liquor license. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the general laws as amended that application has been made to this board for a seasonal, general, on-premise wine and malt liquor license for Ashwood Food Service, Inc., DBA Jake's at the Harbor. Catherine Lomask, manager on the following described premises located at 715A, Route 28, Harwich Port, Mass. 02646. A food concession service with 50 outdoor seats. The building is 540 square feet. The Board of Selectmen will hold a hearing on the application on Monday, September 13th, 2021, no earlier than 6 p.m. in the Griffin Room at the Harwich Town Hall, 732 Main Street, at which time all interested parties are cordially invited to attend. Board of Selectmen Local Licensing Authority, and it was in the Cape Cod Times, August 30th, 2021.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, the public hearing is open. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this? With that, I would accept a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Board discussion, Larry?
I'm in favor of this. I just asked Joel to clarify, from the planning design before, are the 50 seats appropriate for the, in line with what the plan is
Yes,
approved?
50 seats comports with what was anticipated and what will be finalized by site plan review,
Okay,
not the 80 that have been bandied about before.
okay, very good. I'm in favor of it.
Mary?
I just wanted for the record, the application, if anyone looked through the packet, is dated July 31, but I checked with admin, and the delay, because the chief's letter is late August, and the hearing isn't until now, the delay was getting the application completed thoroughly. There were parts that were missing, and so the delay was not in the town, it was on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Mary. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just relieved to have the snack shack open again and functioning as an asset.
Can I get a motion?
I move that we vote to approve Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 12, General On-Premise Seasonal Wine and Malt Liquor License for Ashwood Food Services Incorporated, doing business as Jake's at the Harbor, located at 715A, Route 28, Harwichport,
With seating capacity of.
with a seating capacity of 50.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion?
Only I'll be there soon again.
I'll beat you there, Larry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you. Consent agenda, Mary.
I move that we vote to approve the 3 items in the consent agenda. First is to approve the Assistant Town Administrator's recommendation to grant permission of N-Star Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, for the purpose to install 50 feet plus or minus of 1 foot 3 inch conduit under the public road from proposed handhole number 202/53A to handhole number 202/53B to provide new underground electric service to 149 Clearwater Drive. The second item is to recognize the month of September as National Suicide Prevention Month and authorize the chair to sign the National Suicide Prevention Month proclamation. And third, to accept a donation in the amount of $55,000 to the fire department from Nicholas and Trina Stavropoulos in memory of their daughter Nicole.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Chief LeBlanc? Just want to give you the opportunity to comment. Your memo says a lot, but I don't know if you want to say anything on it.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, Nick and Trina were unable to make it tonight. I did invite them to come. This is a very generous donation. We've been talking to them for probably about 6 months, maybe a little longer, trying to find the right vehicle to use this money. They lost a daughter, unfortunately, I believe 14 years ago. And it was a medical emergency, and they've always felt a strong obligation to give back to the community and to donate to public safety. So they approached us, and we decided on, it actually dovetails with the air pack grant that we did. These will be masks that, the face piece that we wear, it has bone conduction speakers, and actually the microphone is in the mask. So one of the things we struggle with the most is when we're wearing the mask is clear communication, and this fixes that problem. So they bought into it, they thought it was a great idea, and we will be doing a dedication of a plaque and an unveiling at headquarters when we get the equipment in and everything's purchased. So, but I appreciate the board putting on this agenda tonight, and certainly appreciate their generous donation to the department.
Thank you, Chief. Comments from the board? Mary?
Just on N-Star, I know we can't hold their feet to the fire for double poles, but I hope at least anytime we talk to them, we point out the double poles.
Joe?
I just want to emphasize, in this instance, they've confirmed no new poles are needed, there will be no double pole. And the Assistant Town Administrator made sure to make that part of the record, so.
Good.
Don?
I'm just hugely grateful for the donation to the fire department. That in combination with the fact that the chief, even before he was chief, was extremely diligent in going out and searching out grants to keep the department as well equipped as possible. So hats off to everybody there.
Larry?
I'd only comment I'm pleased that we're supporting the National Suicide Prevention. I mean, it's an obvious thing to do, but I know I have, and probably a lot of us have personal impacted by that, and it's really tough. And so all we can do to raise that awareness, we should all get behind it.
Thank you. Thank you. I would comment the same, really, on the suicide prevention. It's an extremely important topic, and we should all be aware of the problem. The generous donation, hats off to them for doing that and for the work the fire department's done. And Mary, thank you for your comments on the double poles and the town for sending the letter. And I believe Chief LeBlanc had a conversation at least with somebody from Verizon, and they were a bit surprised by how many we had. So I think we're making some progress on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to new business, discussion and possible vote to determine whether to continue or disband the Community Center Facilities Committee. This topic has come up. I know one board member has talked about it more than once. And as promised to all board members, anything that comes up, we will put on the agenda after we vet. I've heard a few negative comments in the public that we're assassinating committees, and that's not the case. The next, shortly down the agenda, is the Housing Committee charge. Next week, there's another committee on the agenda. So our staff is doing a tremendous amount of work right now to organize the committees, and we're bringing them forward when we see the need for a conversation. Happy to see Carolyn, the Community Center's director, here tonight, and I know Ralph Smith's here as a member of the Facilities Committee. And I would open this topic, I think, with the Facilities Committee, a representative of the Facilities Committee, if they're interested in talking about the Facility Committee and its need. Is there anyone? Ralph?
My name is Ralph Smith. I'm a retired criminal prosecutor and federal judge, live in Harwich Port. My first question is, why is this issue raised? I really don't, it's been a long time since I addressed a jury, and I may be a little bit on this, but why is this being raised?
I think I just answered that, but we are looking at all of our committees.
Okay.
And this had been brought up multiple times by board members over the last few years. I can remember a conversation I had with Carolyn probably 3 years ago about the Facilities Committee. So that's why it's being brought up.
Understood. Okay. First of all, I've addressed the select persons with an email setting out the reasons that I think we ought to continue this committee. It's a citizens committee. It has a certain number of duties which are not being done by others, or don't need to be done by any other part of the government. We're volunteers. We like what we're doing. We think it's important. We support Carolyn very much in our committee meetings and in her job at the center. First of all, quickly, and I'll try to be brief, unlike some council. This provides a citizens sounding board for Carolyn. Our duties are to discuss and suggest possible programs and events that would take place in the community center. We help her by reviewing the budget. We discuss room rental rates. We hear presentations by applicants who want to rent rooms either for profit or nonprofit reasons. We review the annual goals for the community center with Carolyn. We meet on a monthly basis, by the way, except during the COVID situation. We recently helped plan the 20th anniversary of the community center. And generally, we provide an oversight for the operation of the community center as a group of citizens. And again, I fail to understand why this would be disbanded. We don't cost anything. We're volunteers. We're enthusiastic about our jobs. And it seems to me we do more good than not having us would do harm. So again, I refer again to my email, which pretty much set out what I just said. And again, I would suggest that if there's any question about our needs here to be, I might select the select person who is in charge of us as a liaison might attend our meetings and see, in fact, what we really do. I think we're fairly important. So
Thank you.
Carol does a super job. We support her big time. So,
Thank you.
that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Ralph. I'm just going to correct one thing. They don't always support me. They challenge me and make me better at the job that I do, which is really an important part of their committee. They don't blindly support anything. They do make sure that they are bringing the public's voice forward. The thing that's unique about this committee is that it has a representative from the Council on Aging, which Ralph is that representative. There's a representative from the Youth and Recreation, so that all parts of the building can be represented. Certainly, I talk with my colleagues extensively, but the board hears different concerns from the community. So I would just say that I think that there's an appropriate scope of authority that is in no way diminishing to the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator. And I have learned a great deal from the dedicated individuals who have served and helped me to make the community center better. I do know that we haven't met. COVID happened, and to my knowledge, this is one of the only boards that had an actual sitting chairperson who passed away, and it did take a toll on the board, in all honesty. But the board has been more than willing to be up and running. I do think there's a purpose for them. I think they serve, like a lot of other committees, whether it's the Council on Aging, they're just giving a public voice to the community center. They're also there to help at events and activities as well. So no matter what you decide, because certainly I serve at your pleasure, but I would be remiss if I did not thank them for the countless years that they have put forward, and I do hope you would consider keeping them. They have been an asset. Thank you.
Carolyn. Is there anyone else in the public that wishes to speak on this? I'm going to open it up to the board, and I'll start with Larry, who is the liaison, by the way.
And I'd forgotten that. I think that's new, being a liaison.
It is new.
It is new.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've missed anything yet. Have you had a meeting since I was assigned? I agree with all the comments, and certainly Ralph and Carol and the action of the committee speaks for itself. My one concern I'd like to throw out tonight is, and Carol, I appreciate your comment to serve for the Board of Selectmen and to the administrator. My one concern is I don't want the committee to in any way get in the way of the normal operation of town administrator with all the departments and the staff. And so as to the extent that as an advisory committee and doing all the things you do, I think that's critical. I would like to have us relook at some of the operational communication and administrative reach, so we're sure we're operating as smoothly and as functionally as we can between the town administrator and all our committees. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Larry. Mary?
I'm very much in favor of this committee staying in place. I can't imagine any reason we would want to take volunteer residents and tell them, we don't want you. We've got a page full of openings on some committees. Here we've got people that actually want to help us. So I in no way want to do away with this. If there is some interruption, in reporting through Joe, let's go through. I've got a document here with 9 items that the committee is charged with. Maybe something on there needs to be reworded. I think that could be, our able liaison could probably do that with the committee.
Thank you, Mary. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Another job, Larry.
I'm going to assign that at the end.
I'll be at the next meeting.
I'm in no way disparaging anybody's good efforts here, but I go back to when there was an Albro House where there was a Council on Aging and a Rec and Youth was in the Sisson Road building. And I'm really aware of the history of why this got started. It was the first time we were housing programs that had never been under the same roof before, and the town meeting actually grappled with the idea of how are we going to mediate the people who want to use the building when there's a finite amount of resources in it. I am concerned that I don't know of any, I'm going to take what Ralph said and turn it on its ear. I'm concerned that there's no analogous committee for any other operation in the public domain. Secondly, there is absolutely nothing in the charter that suggests that a committee appoints its own member to go to another committee without the selectmen selecting them. The appointment authority is pretty clear in the charter, that it's derived from the Board of Selectmen. So I was a little stunned to find out that Rec and Youth and Council on Aging sent direct representatives that are never appointed by the Board of Selectmen, for that function. And the third one is I am also concerned about the line of authority because it's a mature building. You've got staff who have various programs that are operating in the building. You can't impose any fee structures without the approval of the Board of Selectmen. And then there's a manager of the building, but that manager of the building reports as a direct report to the town administrator. So with all of that, at a minimum, I'd like to go through the charge and see, what it is that still is of critical need for the community. I get that you don't want to take enthusiasm away, but I know that Council on Aging has Friends of the Council on Aging. There are other mechanisms that could perform the same function. If we keep it, I think we need to clarify the line authorities, and we need to clarify who it is who has the authority to appoint the committee with members, because this was a construct over 20 years ago from a town meeting. So as you pointed out, we had the 20th anniversary for this. This isn't new anymore. I mean, this is something that we do and other towns do. And we have a library, we have other public buildings, and none of them actually have a facilities committee other than this building. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Don. Joe, I'll ask for you to chime in.
Excuse me, certainly, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the committee or the committee status, I really don't have an opinion on that. That is the sole purview of the Board of Selectmen. It is your right and your authority to establish or disband committees as you see fit. I do want to add, and would be remiss, that whether there's a committee or not, to me it's undisputed that Carolyn Carey is exceptional at her job, especially with regard to the community center. And I have never missed an opportunity to call to ask a question or be presented before I even needed to ask for information. Carolyn has the pulse and the beat of that building. I dare say that you probably know every square inch better than most, if not all. And so whether there's a committee or not, I would leave that to the board, because I know that our department head does her job exceptionally well in that venue, and I always can rely upon her for information or anything else that's ever needed.
Thank you, Joe. Mary?
A follow-up question, Joe. Do you feel there has been a problem with the committee versus you being Carolyn's boss? That's the readout.
Personally, no. I will say this with embarrassment that when I first started, I wasn't aware that there was a committee because Carolyn has always been forward with information. When she did advise me of the form, and this is going back when I was an assistant town administrator, my take on that is we have an individual, you've heard me say many times, and I apologize for repeating, but I'll do it. A department head is a subject matter expert. Carolyn's a department head. She's a subject matter expert when it comes to the community center. And however she derives her information, however she determines the uses and the programs and all that, she does it the right way. She relies upon input. She's very conscientious, and she is always, as she's reminded me, first in with the budget and all the information that's requested.
Follow-up, Larry?
Well, I'll try to recover for not making the meeting and not realizing I need to be up to date on the liaison assignments. But I will make it to the next meeting, Ralph. Certainly when I listen to everyone, there's no one at all questioning the need for the committee. I think what I'd like to have a discussion and see, every 3 or 5 years, it's probably time just to relook at what's going on. And we should take that opportunity to see if there's any minor tweaks that we need to make to, there's always room for improvement, even if you think you're 100%. And there's nothing wrong with that, to recheck it. So we'll have discussions, Ralph and Carolyn.
Good evening, Richard Waystack, Harwich Port. I think it's a great thing to look at committees. I think it's also a great thing to look at liaisons. I know a number of committees question what is the role of a liaison. Is it to come to all the meetings? Is it to look at minutes? Is it to check in once a year? I've been a committee chair for 17 years in this town, and usually once a year, I'll have a discussion with a liaison saying, I'm here if you have issues. But I think it's important to know there are a couple things. What a liaison's job is, what is their requirement, and from the chair or the committee to realize what that responsibility is. At the same time, I've been involved with 2 committees for many years. We have a committee, Council on Aging. We have a director who runs the department, whose clear role is through the town administrator. We advise, we advocate. We don't make decisions for that. And I know the same thing that happens in the Board of Assessors. We have a regulatory role. We do not run the operations of the department. And I think looking at the committees to determine what the charge is, what the responsibilities are of each committee, committees change. And we have situations like, facilities that maybe don't meet for a certain period of time for a situation that occurred, but there's a need for the committee in an advocacy role, advice to a chair. They don't run the department. And so I just think it's a great opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to look at the committees, to look at the charge of the committees, to look at the role of the selectmen as liaisons to the committee. This could be a good thing. And I will speak on behalf of His Honor that I think Facilities Committee still has a role and should be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I was reminded of the same today when I looked at committees and we looked at the roles of committees and all of the department heads. I asked somebody the question, this is the only building that we have that has a committee. It's technically a committee for the director. And the answer from the person was, what are you talking about, dummy? Every department head has a committee, or every department has a committee. So in general, I absolutely agree with what's been said, and the direction that I would give would be for Larry as a liaison to be on the agenda for the next meeting for discussion of the charge, and for Larry to come back and we will have a joint meeting between the Facilities Committee and the Board of Selectmen and discuss whether there needs to be a charge change or not. Larry?
Richard raised a point, all selectmen do it somewhat differently. This one escaped me, but my practice has been to attend all the meetings of those committees I'm a liaison to. That's not to try to influence, but it seems like there's always some questions on procedure, so on that I can help with, and to further inform.
Thank you. Don, you had a follow-up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If we do, I'm not going to argue the fact that the committee has functioned in the past and that you don't want to turn off volunteers, but quite apart from the charge, I really strongly feel that we need to address how people arrive at that committee, because there is absolutely no similarity between the Council on Aging and the Rec and Youth sending their designated person to that position automatically and everything else that's in the charter. The charter presupposes that all of the appointments made to volunteer committees are made through the Board of Selectmen. And I think that would be a big help right there if we knew that there was a relationship and everybody understood who was doing what, and that the authority derives from the Board of Selectmen, that the town administrator has his line authorities over the employee, just to clarify that. Then there's the issue of the charge is a whole different issue.
So Larry's going to attend the meeting. Do you want to put together your thoughts anyway on how these members are selected for the joint meeting?
We have other committees that have that model, where there's an ex officio member designated from whatever committee for the CPC, for instance. But we have in the past chosen not to appoint a particular person that they had offered, but asked for them to nominate another person. But the way this has always worked is somewhat like a judicial appointment. It's been a nomination and then a confirmation. This does not operate that way.
Thank you. you want to send Larry examples of that, Don, for that meeting?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Comfortable with that?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. Discussion and possible vote to approve the Board of Selectmen public hearing minutes, May 12th, 2021. Mary?
I move that we vote to approve the Board of Selectmen public hearing minutes, May 12th, 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
None.
Larry? Don? All set? My only comment, again, is to praise the person that are doing these minutes.
Yeah.
Anyone that read through those hearing minutes tonight before the meeting, it was a long read and reminded me how painful it was. So thank you to Lisa Schwab for
Yeah.
putting all that in writing.
And sympathies.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're going to skip C and D, correct?
We are going to skip C and D tonight. That's related to our executive session topic. Joe, I think it'd be fair to say that should come back next week.
Correct.
E,
I
Just-
move,
go ahead.
I move that we vote to finalize the 2021 special town meeting warrant and send to Finance Committee for recommendations.
I apologize for making you to read that. We're going to take that up, but I think that we are going to go through each article and support or not support. We've already supported putting them in the warrant, but I believe now is the appropriate time for the board to vote whether they're going to support them or not support them, correct?
Correct. What I would also ask is, as you go through it, if you just assign the article number to it.
Okay.
And that's what's meant by finalizing before it goes to Finance Committee.
And on the first four, they're all related to wastewater, and Russ Kleeclamp from GHD is here tonight, and Dan Pelletier, our wastewater superintendent, is here tonight to answer some questions that were brought forward from the public, as well as answer anything that anyone may have for questions tonight. So if the two of you wouldn't mind coming up, and we'll dive right in. Yep, and then I think for the board, once we get past the questions, I would look for a motion to support
Each
each
article.
article individually, as we're done with them.
Yeah.
And then we will record our support, and at the end, we'll vote the final warrant.
Okay.
Joe, is there this is the order, so do we want to do Article 1?
Yeah, that's the preference, yes.
Okay, so we will, Mary, as we read the articles, we'll assign the number 1 to the first, and so on and so on.
Okay.
So the first one is fund costs related to wastewater. Nope, that's not it. Let's skip down. Fund costs related to updating the comprehensive wastewater management plan, the CWMP, and that would be in the amount of $250,000. And Mary, as we read these, we'll talk about funding source because we're going to have to add that into the motion.
Okay.
This was one that drew some questions, if I'm correct, Dan?
Yeah, and I think the questions that we're looking to address tonight kind of touch on pretty much all three of the first wastewater issues that we're planning to put on town meeting. So I guess it appears there may be some confusion as to what our strategy is. We are requesting funds to update the CWMP as well as to move forward with completing some design work. So I guess just as far as structure and process and why we're asking to do all of these at once, I'll turn it over to Russ to give their strategy that GHD is planning on moving forward, but.
Sure, thanks, Dan. Russ Kleecamp, engineer with GHD. So we have a few.
1 second, Russ. Jamie, is his tone okay, or do you want to move the microphone over?
Just pull it a little closer.
Thank you.
Russ Kleecamp, engineer with GHD. So there was a number of articles in the packet that we have assigned some budgetary numbers to, and I like giving the disclaimers out about these things. So the numbers that are presented, we had a very short period of time to come up with some numbers, some substantial numbers for upcoming wastewater work. And it's always a balancing act because we have to come up with a number, and again, these are placeholder numbers that will cover what the fees are, but if they're overinflated too much, they become too high, and they may not get the votes at town meeting. And I've seen that happen before at town meetings. So we had to give an honest look at each one of these tasks that we were asked to do. The CWMP had a budgetary number of $250,000. That is not the scope that is not the engineering fee if GHD is asked, which we hope we are, but I never, I take this selection process very seriously. So if we are asked, we'll come up with a finite scope. We've already presented a memorandum. What I call, the big four, the 4 items that need to be looked at, the growth projections need to be nailed down. IAs need to be reviewed. We have to get a strong financial model for future planning and public participation. Those are really the big topics. I'll look you all in the eye tonight and say that we plan, if asked, to do that CWMP, which is a community plan, that we want to get that done or as close to the revisions done as close to possible, so we know a finite path moving forward. I can truly understand that from someone in the general public looking at these articles saying, hey, great, there's another $2.1 million for more sewers, but wait a second, they said they're doing the CWMP and they're looking at all these options, so why are we going for this now and what's going on? I get it. That's a legitimate concern. And, Dan and I talk almost daily about wastewater, so there's a lot of behind the scenes. So hopefully, with this discussion tonight, we can shed a little light on what we're trying to do. So step one is to get that CWMP looked at. It's a community-wide plan. We know what we need to look at, and we have every intention of looking at that. We've done that with several other communities, with the other towns on Cape Cod, Falmouth, Mashpee, Chatham, quite a few, and several off Cape. So we feel that as a budgetary number, that is appropriate. And then our final scope, which the board will see, Dan will see, that spells out exactly what we will do and will not do. That will determine the final engineering amount. We don't anticipate it to be over $250,000. We anticipate it to be less. There's one thing I don't want to do is come back and ask for more money on anything. Been in that position before. I'm good, all set. So I want to give you honest numbers that we can use and plan for the future.
If I can add to that, I think it's important, when we're talking about the CWMP revisions, we're talking about revisions and growth projections townwide. Many parts of Harwich, and we have the ability to start that work in East Harwich, which will inform the subsequent design article for the remaining East Harwich with the $2.1 million.
And I'm sorry, Dan, I should have elaborated. That was strictly discussion on, the CWMP item. Are there any questions on that, or shall I move into the other items and how that works?
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The first unnumbered one is to fund costs related to updating the comprehensive wastewater plan. Fine, but the actual article, I just want to hear this in English so that everybody understands it. This is not to pick up and just start up doing what we had already been doing. This is to examine that, the premises, so that we can do something intelligent with the here and now, the engineering. So we're not planning on just building what we had stopped at, and in this article. Just in plain English, though, people who've been questioning this.
We are not intending to pick up the CWMP that was previously adopted by the town
And implement it.
continue on its path.
Okay.
We are looking to revise and switch directions.
Correct.
So is that it for that article?
For the CWMP, but
Okay.
One other
Mary.
question. Do I recall that when we talked about this, was it last week or at the wastewater meeting, there was something about a certain amount per hour that was in the billing? And I'm assuming
Correct.
that's the not to exceed 250? Is that correct?
partially correct. So this is just a budgetary number so that the town allocates enough funds to have that to pay for the engineering. When it comes time for the actual contract, we would strongly recommend that we set it up. There's, two kind of major forms of contracts. It's either lump sum, we say we're gonna do this and you give us this, or an hourly, not to exceed. Whatever the finite number is we come up with, say it's $225,000, it would be not to exceed $225,000 based on hourly billing. So every invoice, you'll see the hours. If we don't spend it, we don't bill you for it.
Great.
And with the 6-figure, 7-figure projects, there's just so many aspects to these that it's very difficult to project a lump sum. And it's the fair for both consultant and for town to do it that way.
I agree, thank you.
Welcome.
Larry, comments on this article?
Yes. Only to the extent that the CWMP was always designed to be a living document, one that we, where the intent was to periodically to re-examine it, tear it apart, put it back together. This is money very well spent. We spent some approaching $25 million in that neighborhood. We have big money. We need to completely examine it and be sure we're comfortable moving forward with community involvement and all this. I strongly endorse this.
Thank you. As we get into the bottom line, and we read this into the motion for support or not support, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, where we had said that we might get the money for this, we cannot do that. American Rescue Plan Act money that the town of Harwich is sitting on, roughly 1.2 million, we cannot use that for engineering services. So the proposal in front of you tonight is to pay for this out of free cash. So if the board agrees with that, that would be what we would be voting to support along with the article. Before we go on to reading the motion, I'll open it up to the public for questions on this article, which we will refer to as Article 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Chory, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself right now, even though I am the chairman of the Finance Committee, and we'll have a meeting later on Thursday to also vote and look at these articles. Mark, is this...
Russ.
Russ? Okay. Sorry. Thanks, Russ. Russ, what you just said, is it outlined in your scope of the letter that Mark Dranville gave this board and to Joe and to Dan, the scope of work that was very well eloquently laid out here, your scope of work? Is that what, excuse me, of what's covered in the $250,000, roughly? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's a very comprehensive scope of work, clearly delineates what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. I just had one little question on, if you can remember, on the project schedule. It lines out you can, if you want to see it, you can have a timeline of deliverables. The task 3 of that table, it says notice of public change or other mechanism as defined by the MEPA, approximately 4 months. Is that 4 months added on to when you finish your report?
Let me take one look at that
Sure.
real quick.
So that would push that out to July of next year.
Correct, and as actually talking, Mark couldn't make it tonight. He is watching on TV, so
Okay.
he's lucky enough to stare at my bald spot all night. But one of the things I talked with Mark, we did talk. We're hoping to get the CWMP revised by the best case scenario, springtime next year. Worst case, summertime. There is, I believe, a public review period by MEPA anytime you go through this process, so I believe that's what that 4 months entails. But it is our intent, if we get authorization after town meeting, to have the CWMP completed no later than summer of next year, which I hope is in accordance with that schedule that you have in front of you.
But does summer include MEPA's approval?
It would.
It would include that, okay.
I believe so.
Just for the public, will you say what MEPA is?
Sure.
Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act.
Thank you.
John,
Okay.
if I can add too,
Sure, yeah.
when Mark Drainville was here speaking on that, one of the things in the conversations we've had to date with MEPA is it's still dependent upon what we're looking to change, whether or not we'll have to go through the full MEPA review process. So if we get through the public hearing and public input and get into this process and MEPA says, well, you don't have to go through the formal review, then that would be cut off the timeline and would be reflective and not to exceed price.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, because I do see in the different tasks, I know you want to move this along, Mike,
Go
but
ahead.
each task outlines a public input hearing on it, which is what we've all been asking for, and the public is always invited to attend, so that's a good thing.
I've already given my cell phone out and had quite a few conversations and emails from residents, and I enjoy speaking with folks and getting to know the community.
Because it is, as we all know, a very big subject. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else in the public wish to speak? Mary, if you would.
I move that we vote to approve Article 1, fund costs related to updating the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, CWMP, for $250,000 to be funded out of free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
The standard you've used in the past was to accept and adopt.
To accept and adopt.
Joe, anything else? You all set?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Discussion from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next one, which would be Article 2. Make sure I get the right one. Fund costs related to additional wastewater collection system design in the East Harwich area for $2.1 million. Also, funding source of free cash. This will be noted as Article number 2. Dan, do you want to start this one? On the wastewater ones, I want to have the conversation first and the board's vote.
Yeah, so I guess to pick up from Article 1, working towards the initial part of the CWMP process and then getting into design, this would be to pick up where that leaves off. Initial work, Russ, why don't I turn it over to you?
Sure. So we're looking at sewering the 4 subwatersheds that we spoke about at the last wastewater meeting. And we know we have a certain amount of nitrogen that needs to be removed from those watersheds. Just as I'm explaining now, I did receive the email from Sandy and Claire McClarty earlier. Some of their points might be, would you like me to address email in this discussion, or would you like to deal with that as a separate matter after these items?
Whenever you want, but I think part of this conversation.
Sure. So this is, for the next couple minutes now, this is just me kind of talking out loud, some thoughts and things like that. Now, we know the town of Harwich has an IMA with the town of Chatham, 300,000 gallons per day. And I believe that, is there a fixed fee that you pay for 300,000? So whether you put 1 gallon in or 300,000 gallons?
We have a purchase capacity as well as a 23.08% cost share on fixed expenses at the treatment plant.
So would it be an accurate statement to say it's in Harwich's best interest to maximize that flow to Chatham? So we know in this area, these 4 subwatersheds, it's relatively close to the town of Chatham. It's, flow's already going over there. We want to get that flow into the town of Chatham. How do you do that? You got to come up with a collection system. So, we talk about gravity sewers all the time. There's a lot of different types of collection systems. There's gravity sewers, low pressure, vacuum steps, blah, blah, blah. All these certain things. But because we have the modeling at a point now where we're fairly confident on the extent of the gravity mains, we were able to come up with a total linear footage of the sewer mains. I want to say it was in the ballpark of 48,000 or 50,000 linear feet for this next phase. And that $2.1 million, after doing enough of these pipeline projects, we get a good sense per foot what these cost to survey, to design, even to install. But again, we're at such a new stage of the whole project, we still had to be conservative to make sure that the monies we put forward or that $2.1 million is going to cover the engineering fees. So it works out to roughly, it's I believe in the realm of $35 to $40 a foot, which is fairly consistent with design for sewer mains. We took a look at the sheet count, how many pump stations are going to be involved. And again, depending on the final layout of the sewers, that will dictate the final engineering cost. And we'll have the final layout once the model's complete, which it will be very soon for that area. Now for the discussion to address the email from the McClartys. And it's a little bit of a tough, because they email, I'm sure that they would have a response to what I'm about to say, and if you're listening, please, I'm happy to discuss on the phone again. It's not a perfect scenario for back and forth, but question of IAs comes up, these innovative alternative systems, which is going to be part of the CWMP review. But let's just, a what-if scenario, what if we IA'd that entire 4 watersheds? We can't get any more flow to Chatham. It's just something we don't see happening. We just, it's probably not going to happen. Practical. And you can't really checkerboard IA systems in when you have gravity mains or sewer mains going up the road. As soon as you put a sewer main, a gravity sewer main down the road, you want to connect as many parcels as you can to it, because it makes it the most financially palatable for the operators and the owners. You get better, the rates coming in. And plus, pump stations and sewer treatment plants work better when there's consistent flows coming into them. And how do you get the consistent flows with the more connections? And you also are under, whether it's 3 or 4 milligrams per liter, whatever the standard is, that whatever you donate to the collection system is going to be treated to that high level. And it's going to sound like I don't like IA systems with what I'm about to say. It's not the truth. In a perfect world, everybody would have an IA system, and life would be great, but it's not the world we live in. There's been a lot of reports for some of the, we work closely with other communities that have these systems, and there's been a lot of reports about the owners of installed IA systems, turning off blowers, things like this that, my energy bill is huge, I'm just going to shut this off. Or it's noisy at night, I'm going to turn this off. An IA system, for all due respect, is like a little mini wastewater treatment plant in front of someone's house. That person has to be dedicated to the operations and maintenance of that system. I know other towns, they have different arrangements where sometimes the towns will come out. It's not the town staff, but there's a monitoring requirement from DEP when IA systems are put in that you need to make sure that you're keeping up with them. So to try to convince every single 600-something parcels of North Chatham that you're going to have these and you have to commit, Harwich, that you're going to have these systems, it's a challenging battle. So we kind of know we're going the direction of a collection system. Now, with that being said, at the last presentation, we showed the limits of the gravity coverage. It was all those blue parcels. Then we have these little tidbits of areas that we were saying the gravity mains cannot reach. So those smaller areas at the end of the gravity sewer mains, we have to make a decision. Depending on what the nitrogen removal percentages are, maybe we don't need to sewer them. We can drop the gravity sewers deeper, proceed with caution when doing that, but you can drop the sewers deeper, which may cost more, but you could probably run them further. You could have a separate individual pump station, but it would only be serving a relatively low number of homes, so it's not ideal. You can have low pressure, or you could potentially put at IA systems in those little clusters that you can't reach the gravity to. And with low pressure, you can go buy a house and you could put an IA in one. It's a very small main. It's a 1-inch, 1.5-inch main from a low pressure system, and you can go right by that. So we can look at these small clusters, and that might be an ideal location for IA systems to be reviewed. So that's definitely where you come in. That now it becomes a hybrid system. We have gravity, maybe low pressure, maybe not, IA systems, and that's where we would look to really incorporate those, where it makes the most financial sense. And if at the end of the day, if we knew we had the sewer in the area and we couldn't get it with gravity, it's either going to be low pressure or IA. Maybe you approach the homeowner and say, hey, which one of these? And I'm sure the town will need to make decisions about low pressure. Do you buy grinder pumps? I know it's been said in the past, we don't want any low pressure. We can definitely revisit that, or if you tell me right now, no low pressure, that's it. Last time you tell me, I won't say the words again. But it's something that needs to be looked at as part of this whole process. So we know we need to do a collection system, and plus we've had some discussions with Wisconsin, and they would like to tie in as well. So if we have the collection system there, it's a relatively short force main that gets them into the system. And again, if the whole masses are on IAs, you'd have to run a dedicated collection system for the Wisconsin to tie in. So we know we're going in the direction of a collection system. That's why we felt it was prudent to come up with this number of $2.1 million. Now again, the final engineering number is going to be based on the scope that we come up with at the end of the modeling. But we know that the town meeting has to happen. If it does get a positive vote, then we'll hopefully move forward with contract negotiations and go from there. The other item that we want to make sure that we do is also put the town of Harwich in the best possible position for any federal funding. It's never a guarantee, and we can't control what happens up above, but we can control what the town does. And having the shovel-ready plans as soon as possible for really any infrastructure project, but specifically for this one, may open up the door to a nice grant or a nice some relief from the federal government.
We'll call it an offset.
An offset, good word. So that's for the larger collection system. Hopefully, I didn't irritate too many people by saying that, but I try to stick to the facts and what's really going to happen. Some things have to be studied and looked at, and other things we know from the experience of other towns. For example, Provincetown, when they put the vacuum sewer in, they had a checkerboard pattern because
Filled it in.
they wanted to limit the amount of homes, and now everybody that originally wasn't connected, they all want to connect now, but they don't have capacity. So if we start putting gravity mains down and say, this house is going to do this, this one's going to do this one's going to do this, other towns have done it. It just doesn't work. It's a bad deal. We don't want to go that way.
Thank you.
I think too, if I can just throw in a couple points that, with concerns about sewering for development and things of that nature, the $2.1 million that we are bringing forward at town meeting is really to sewer the minimum nitrogen removal requirements as identified in our targeted watershed management plan. So we're not looking to Although we will consider growth with the CWMP revisions and things of that nature, what we're looking to do now is position ourselves to meet our baseline removal requirements, and to do that through a shovel-ready project with hopefully to take advantage of future funding.
Thank you. What's that? Larry?
Good explanation, Russ, thank you. And Dan, as always. Just one thing that people, I'm not sure always think about is Russ, you started your comment that we have to, based on the modeling and also, we're required to move a certain amount of nitrogen, which leads us to, in Harwich, to not have to sewer the whole town with the modeling. Roughly speaking, we would, if you take the whole town, we'd sewer about half of the town. But that's based on a system that takes the nitrogen down to 3 to 5 parts per million. If we were to go extensive to IA, and there's some variation, but more than likely, the best you could get is maybe somewhere between 11 and 15 parts per million, which, interesting enough, would greatly increase the number of houses that have to be sewered. I'm not sure anyone thinks about that always, so there's inherent uncomfortableness, if you will, for treating more than you will if you do it. But you make good remarks, Russ, that there are areas based on pumps, but also based on density that IAs make more sense. So we have to be open-minded, but we also have to take the facts of, we can't lose the perspective that the whole goal of this is to remove nitrogen at the moment.
And, you know, one of the things that some other towns have done, I don't know if this was ever a consideration, but for properties, I know the town of Wareham does this, I believe a few other towns, for any properties that are within, for new construction, new homes that are within 100 feet of a water body, they have to put in an innovative or alternative septic system to get that nitrogen removal for new construction in areas that don't have sewer. The town of Harwich.
We do in Harwich, yes.
Great, excellent.
Thank you. Mary?
No, I'm pretty convinced that we're designing this to get the minimum we have to do, and we're taking advantage of Chatham where we're already paying for capacity that we're not using. I'm kind of a budget freak, and this just makes financial sense to me.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to get into the great IA versus force main versus gravity feed debate, because I'm pretty sure we lost most of the public in that discussion already. I'm going to drill down a little bit on what Larry said, though, because this isn't just a simple, there's a bunch of real estate and we got to denitrify it. There's sub-embayments that we're looking at. In the presentation, some of them had already been done to the point where they far exceeded the minimum amount of nitrogen processing that we're required to do, and others didn't. So again, in English, because I'm anticipating the discussion going this way at town meeting, is this going to wind up completing the so-called third contract in East Harwich of the defined areas that we originally started with? Or are we taking this to be a fresh look at all of the sub-embayments that still need something to be treated? And that's where this money is going to go.
So the 2.1 is prioritized for sewer design in the Pleasant Bay and Round Cove sub-watersheds, which are the two in the northern portion of East Harwich, if you recall that map with the 4 watersheds that we looked at the last meeting. We will have to pick up where we left off, either on 39 or on Church Street, to have a contiguous system up to that section. So we will have to start in Lower Muddy Creek to get to Pleasant Bay and Round Cove. But the intent of this money is to design for the Round Cove and Pleasant Bay, not for Upper and Lower Muddy Creek.
For areas that have heretofore not been treated.
Correct.
You all set, Don?
Yep.
We'll open it up to the public.
John Chory again. Russ and Dan, I looked at, I looked at all the information from the that deep dive of the wastewater you gave 2 weeks ago. And there's a lot of information into Don's point. One could easily get lost as soon as you start talking some stuff here. But I do have one slide that was in the Pleasant Bay Alliance packet that I'll share with you, and I can speak to it as you look at it. you folks live and breathe this stuff every day. I do not. And that slide says, and I'm not sure what the time frame is, but the first portion says, that we've met the nitrogen cleansing or attenuation by the conclusion of the Phase 2 project. And then the next block down says it gives us now the opportunity to look at Phase 3 of the sewer project. And this comes back, I think we should do definitely in favor of the comprehensive water plan review. But I'm on the fence now of the other subsequent articles that we'll be talking about, including this one. This one is $2.1 million. If we're on track to meet our nitrogen attenuation levels, which is a 5-year plan, and we're into 3 years of that 5-year plan. So we've got 2 years that we're supposedly are meeting what we're supposed to meet. Might be a good time to go ahead with this comprehensive review plan, come up with a new revised plan based on that previous memo I showed you of your project scope, and do it after we get that comprehensive revision of the comprehensive management plan. And then go back to town meeting and say, we've got the new plan now. We're not working off an old plan that I think everyone sitting up there will agree that it was flawed in a couple ways, at least, if not many reasons. And then have a new plan now that we've all agreed in, that the public has had tremendous input in. Through your scope of work, you've outlined lots of public hearings. So that's my question there on, do we just wait until we get this new plan before we go forward? And then also, how many homes do you expect to do in this phase or contract 3? Is how many homes? And then if you can give an estimated cost of construction costs for those homes, and then, how long does phase or contract 3 take? So how you want to address it first, Dan?
If I can touch on, I guess, your first question,
Yeah.
which is Phase 3, and, I guess I'll first start by stating that the attenuation rates that changed in the upper and lower Muddy Creek to suggest, I guess, if you will, that we've over-sewered or gotten more credit than we would have previously, the attenuation rates in Round Cove and the Pleasant Bay watershed have stayed stagnant. So where we did realize a benefit from the nitrogen attenuation rate change in the upper and lower Muddy Creek subwatersheds, we don't have the same benefit in the Round Cove and Pleasant Bay, which is why I do have the confidence, if you will, to continue designing in that area, because the new data suggests what the old data suggests, that the attenuation rates in that area, I believe, are 2%, and they didn't change between the updates. Mm-hmm. So the years in the table that you provided, so John brought up the Harwich section of the Targeted Watershed Management Plan. The first 5 years of that plan requires Harwich to remove 2,672 kilograms of nitrogen, and the second 5-year block requires us to remove 1,565 kilograms. We are currently at year 3 in that first 5-year window, so to John's point, technically, yes, we could wait until the other work was done. However, if we waited, we may not have the opportunity to get funding for a shovel-ready project. My confidence lies in that the new data doesn't indicate an attenuation rate change in the remaining subwatersheds, and the benefit of having a shovel-ready project, in my opinion, outweighs the alternative.
I understand the shovel-ready concept, but as I've explained to other people, that's like me saying that I'm going to go out and buy a sports car tomorrow, hoping that my grandmother dies in 6 months so I can pay for it. And we don't know what the federal government, no one does, and I agree with that. And but I just wanted to see if we are meeting what we said we were going to meet. I think that's a big a deal for us to do. If we say in 5 years we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And according to Carol Ribke at Pleasant Bay Alliance, we are doing that, and that we have a window to put a pause before we do a contract 3. Get the comprehensive new comprehensive wastewater plan with more input from the general public, it might be an alternative way to go. That's all. So let's discuss that. If can you give me those rough numbers on what contract 3 would?
Sure, just a few other points too.
Sure.
Not only by doing the sewering, like Dan said, we could potentially take advantage of the federal funding, but when it comes to infrastructure projects, if it's something that you know you need to do, if you wait, it's only going to cost you more. Engineers are going to cost you more. We never know what's going to go on with materials. I mean, no one ever saw this pandemic coming. There can be all sorts of issues happening. I mean, when the hurricanes hit the Gulf Coast, it hit the factory that makes the resin for PVC pipes, and it throws everything at the topsy-turvy. Now, with that being said, you know, we want to get the CWP done. But again, this area of North Chatham, we know we have to add North Harwich last time.
East Harwich.
Promise.
They're going to pay for it, right?
East Harwich.
Yeah, at least got the town right.
Just say Harwich.
I'm on vacation. Did I already use that one up already? We know we need to get flow to Chatham. We know that.
Oh,
We
for
have
sure.
to get flow there. The only way we're going to get flow there is through a collection system. We know that much, and we know that's going to have to happen. The exact extent of the collection system, the depth of the, we don't know all that, but we will know that very soon. So that would be my only plea to you, saying that we have enough confidence that we're going in a direction that we can start funding this now at the lowest possible cost, which is funding today. If we wait 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you can add 3 to 5% on any of these numbers if we wait a year, which, you know, at $2.1 million is a lot of money. You asked about estimated construction costs. Now, I can guarantee you, Mark, my boss, is squirming in his seat because he hates it when I talk.
I won't hold you. It's just, I was in the engineering field for a long, long time. I've sat in your seat, and I could give estimated costs without being held to it.
And what I'll say is that, you know we need to remove about 80,000 gallons. And so this is very rough numbers. I see everybody taking notes, and they're going to hold me to these numbers, but this is just very early.
I'm not, because I learned my lesson on
Yeah,
the first
oh,
phase in East Harwich.
This
So
is just
if we
discussion.
have roughly, 80,000 gallons. Through our work in other communities, we know that a residential home, on average, can be anywhere between 130 and 150 gallons per day. So we have somewhere in the vicinity of 500 to 600, 450 to 600 homes that we're going to be sewering. And I'm purposely giving ranges to keep this
That's
because I don't know.
additional homes on top of the
Additional
404 right now we've done.
Correct.
You're gonna-
Additional is part of it.
Just
Go
a
ahead.
quick statement. We need to sewer more houses than we've done to date to
Okay.
meet the removal requirements in the other Sept watershed.
Sure.
Just as a benchmark
Yep.
to start.
Yep, I understand. That was what, 500s?
In the realm of 500. It could be, high 400s, maybe high 500s,
Okay.
600,
We'll-
somewhere around
We'll
there.
go with 500, okay.
Perfect.
Or any number you want to tell me, we're going to go with.
We'll go
That's it.
between 450 and 600.
Oh, that's even better, okay. 450, okay.
And here's where it really gets good. So when we look at these major sewer projects
Yes.
per property,
Yeah.
I've seen, depending on the density, the concentration, I've seen the numbers anywhere from $25,000 to $75,000 per parcel.
Per house.
Per
yeah,
house.
yeah.
Per house. When you break down, so if you just took the sheer amount of, okay, the sewer cost $20 million, we had 500 homes, just straight division for a very large scale number. So when you do the math on those numbers, you're gonna get a range. It's gonna be an 8-figure number. It might start with a 2, might start with a 3, might start with a 4.
Okay,
It's up there.
So 25 to what? 65?
25 to, as high as 75. I've seen
75,
something.
okay.
When you go really long lengths between homes, that's
Yep.
why you want to focus on the concentrated areas to get more bang for your buck.
Yep, okay, I can do the math on that, okay.
So
yeah.
it's a big number.
Sure, it's a huge number.
And every year we wait, we add 3 to 5% to that
Yep.
number.
See, and that's, I think, important for the general public out. I can't grasp parts per billion, you lose me when you're there. $50 million, I can grasp. I understand $50 million. If we can do, and we'll get a range here, a dollar amount, and that, okay. And then how long does something like this take? Once you do the design, the construction phase, to contract 3 is finished.
Years.
Years.
The design's likely a year best case scenario. I mean,
Okay.
it's a lot of work, depending on
Yep.
survey, borings, all sorts of things, number of permits we have to file, things like that. And then, construction. Cape Cod's, gotta love Cape Cod for construction. You got spring and fall that you gotta go like heck for. If we can work in areas in the summertime, that will expedite the schedule, and if winter allows us to work, that will also expedite the schedule.
So three to 5 years, maybe, plus a year for design? I mean, I'm just trying to, because I want to see when we're going to be back at the apple again for more for the town, so that Carol can figure out debt schedules and stuff, that's all.
If everything was approved at this town meeting
Yeah.
in the fall, I mean.
I would say 5+, because Dennis is.
5 years might be a best-case scenario.
Best case 5
And
years.
maybe if the stars align, 4 years.
Okay.
But
Well, it's 4 to 6, how's that?
I like it. Now we're talking ranges.
We can put performance bonuses in there or something? You know?
That's up for the town to decide.
Okay, I mean, that's always a great incentive. Okay, well, thank you very much, Russ. Again, I mean, what you've given me, I can grasp quickly. The other stuff I have a hard time with, but.
Well, if you have $50 million, $50 is 1 part per million, I think, something like that.
Yeah, but then you throw out
I got-
half a dozen
I lost
acronyms in there and
everybody
you
with
lost
that
me.
one, so.
All right, I'm getting back to the,
Okay.
anyone else in the public wish to ask a question on this article? Any follow-up from the board?
None.
Yeah.
Don?
Just because this has been a lot of flotsam and jetsam, so you'll excuse me for the last 20 minutes or so. Let me get back to the reality. When you're looking at all those maps, there are certain sections that we quite inadvertently over-sewered, and we got a better result than we were expecting. And there are other parts of that mosaic, because I don't think the public understands. It's not just a piece of real estate you're trying to take the nitrogen out of. There are different areas that load different places. So, again, this is merely for us to move forward, not to necessarily complete the contract we did not fund the last time around. This particular article is, we still haven't met our obligations to the state and to the EPA about sewering the area, and so we have to break that down into smaller pieces, and we are going to be looking at those other areas that heretofore we have not done. And I believe that's a correct statement, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what we need to concentrate on, and I definitely agree with the inflation stuff, because it's not just inflation. Everybody is forgetting that we're further ahead than other places, but everybody else is scurrying to get even with us. So the cost of pipe, the cost of construction workers and everything, I mean, the capacity is a capacity. They're not going to wind up ramping up for the entire Cape without a cost associated with it. So by the time you get 4, 5, 6 towns at the same moment trying to do things, that's going to drive up the cost just because you've got 100 widgets, but now you got a lot of customers to buy them. So we really do need to be able to plan for those areas that we haven't been doing and get a plan into place so that we're not last in line.
The only comment I'll make is we continue to talk about over-sewering. We haven't hooked one home up yet. So what we continue to talk about is projections. And the other thing that we continue to talk about is what we're required to remove today, not what 10 years is going to look like. And we talked briefly today about chemicals of emerging concern. We're all looking at what's happening in Chatham, and sooner or later, we're going to have to treat more than we've been required to treat right now. Yeah. And you're not going to do that with IAs. You're going to do that through sewering. So I know the word over-sewering's been used quite a bit in the last couple meetings. Newsflash, we haven't sent a gallon yet. So, Mary?
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 2, fund costs related to additional wastewater collection system design for $2.1 million, funded out of free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next article didn't make it onto the agenda, but it is in the packet and the warrant. Dan, we had a discussion of this last week and again this morning, and I believe you were speaking to Joe about it. Before we add this on for the board vote on 400,000, have we gotten anywhere with the conversation we had?
I'm still waiting for a return communication.
So just for the public, what that means is there's about $1 million or just over $1 million left in Contract 1 and Contract 2 in East Harwich. And this could be funded, if Dan gets confirmation, could be funded out of that money and not a new appropriation or a free cash spending. So if we vote this tonight, we can vote it with the intent that you'll be back to us to potentially remove it,
As
correct?
soon as I have the info.
Okay, and then the other question that was asked of you, and you had, I think, already reached out, was what engineering on this has already been done since these two roads were scheduled to be done in Contract 2, I believe, Phase 2, Contract 2. Are we gonna get a credit for the engineering that's already been done, or at least some work that will save us some money with GHD?
So, again, a response I'm still presently waiting for. I have asked previously, and I have asked again as recently as this week, as to where the design drawings were for the streets that were removed from Phase 2, Contract 2. We were under contract with CDM Smith for them to produce design drawings for all of the Phase 2 area. We have not received drawings for all of the Phase 2 area. So I have made the request for the streets that have not been done, and those will certainly inform and either allow us to accomplish or greatly reduce the scope that is in the packet tonight.
And do you need a request from the Board of Selectmen, or do you think your request is enough?
I think, I would like to hope my request is enough. I will be back next Monday if I don't get a response.
So the board could vote this tonight as Article 3 with the intention to remove it after we have further conversation about this, and we can remove it even on town meeting floor. With that, I'll open it up for discussion. Larry?
No, I wish to move that we go ahead with the discussion we talked about, to approve the funding for Continental Drive and Widow Drive, contingent on the response we have from our water and wastewater chair.
Okay. Mary?
I agree. I think we owe it to the people who live on Continental and Widow who followed bad advice from us. So I think we owe it to them to do this.
Is that a second?
Was yours a motion?
Mine is a motion.
We got to get into the motion. We'll have to lengthen the motion.
It's
So
much
I would ask that
fancier.
you would reread that after we have the,
Okay.
because we're going to have to do accept and adopt the
Accept and
value
adopt.
and free cash. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I voted to at least have it available to put on the warrant, because that's the first step. I totally agree with Mary. I cannot believe that a prior administration actually told people, you better get an engineer and start spending money. But despite the fact we have different people here, I feel really badly about them because they did rely on our advice corporately. But there's nobody here at this table that gave them that advice. That being said, it's news to me that you might be able to accomplish that within the funding that you had. That's one thing, but that's why I was asking about the moving the ball forward on the other articles, because if you've already achieved a certain amount of success in a particular area, I'm looking to try to do other things that we haven't even begun to address yet. I'm not really looking to add on to, it's kind of like taking a test and getting special credit for a test you already had 100 on. It's nice and you can put it in your trophy case, but it's not really doing anything. So I'm not going to be voting for this in terms of supporting it, but I am supportful of the town meeting have the opportunity, absent the funding being available. But if you could do it the other way, go forward and prosper.
So I'm going to just make the other comment one more time. Already achieved is a broad statement, and I don't think that any of us can sit here and say we've achieved anything except for put wastewater pipes in the ground. If we're going to go buy these roads anyway, which we are, makes absolutely no sense to me at all not to collect from those neighborhoods. So with that, any discussion from the public on this one?
Yeah.
Little briefer, John, please.
John Shorty, this is very brief because I got some figures from the last one. How many homes, is it 57 homes, rough?
It's my understanding.
57? And you gave me the construction costs of $25,000 to $75,000. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mary, do you want to make a motion?
Yes,
Hold on,
I
let
move.
Dan go.
Oh, yeah, just to throw in a couple things on that. If it can be done through a change order, it can be done under the unit pricing that the project was bid under. The bid for that project was opened in 2019, and we're not gonna get a cheaper unit price in 2021. And I guess, John, you'd asked about the amount of parcels, and I guess just about sewering or over-sewering or not over-sewering. To Mike's point, one of the things that allowed us the benefit to even say those words was that there was a break in the North Chatham Beach, which is in the process of closing. I believe it has a 100-year cycle of opening and closing, and those hydrodynamic conditions that we were in previously are likely to come back. So the attenuation rates are subject to change, and over-sewering may not be the case in some time from now.
Thank you. Go ahead. John?
I move.
Sorry. Sorry.
It's okay.
Next one, I promise.
Third time's the charm.
Dan, can you clear up, do we get credit now if we sewer these 57 homes? Are they part of our nitrogen attenuation credit? Because there was some discussion that it doesn't count doing these homes.
The way that the formula is right now, it would show a surplus in removal credits. However, that surplus is contingent upon the natural cycle that is Pleasant Bay and could change. So while we could be getting surplus credits today, we may have just enough down the road. Okay. So we're putting money in the bank, if you will. And another point to the 300,000 gallons per day of flow that we purchased, right now, the attenuation rates would suggest that, we don't need to hit the 300,000, however, we purchased it. So these homes would put a dent in that extra capacity we purchased.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mary. I promise.
Okay. I move that we accept and adopt Article 3, funding costs related to WITA and Continental wastewater collection system design in the amount of $400,000
Yes.
to be funded from free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
3-1, Joe. All right, we're going to get on to the next one, which is fund costs related to Route 28 wastewater collection system and design. Also, we'll need to get rid of the ARPA, but this is an article related to putting some dry pipe in the ground under Route 28 before Mass DOT does their paving project. Once Mass DOT does their paving project, there's a 5-year moratorium on cutting that pavement. Along with patches are never as good as the original surface. Discussion from the board. Before we get into Dan, I just want to know if there's any discussion on this one. And Don, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one I absolutely do support. I mean, there's no question that that's an area, a town, or at least a potential route for piping that we're going to need at some point because we haven't even begun in that area. Forget the 5 years. They're not going to be finished with the project for probably a couple of years. So you're going to be looking at us being closed out of doing anything for 7 years to even begin. So I think it's important that we have that option. I don't know where anybody got the idea that what we're trying to do is either go to Chatham or build our own plant, because that is not what we've been looking into. I think, from what I know from the DHY discussions, there's at least a possibility of getting a partnership together with an adjoining town, and that would clearly be to everybody's advantage. So I'm in favor of this.
Mary?
I'm in favor of it. It just financially makes sense for all the reasons Don stated.
Thank you. Larry?
The same.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public and not call on our experts unless you do. Anyone in the public have a question on this one? Go ahead, John. Come on, you're halfway out of your seat.
This should be pretty quick. Pretty much the same. Again, I can grasp numbers and stuff. Any idea, Dan, on how many homes it could possibly pick up from this? And where's it going to go?
28 to the river, right?
bridge.
Which
Yeah.
is what, 2,000 feet?
Yeah, 2,200.
It would, I'd have to look at a
Yeah,
map. to give you
okay.
an accurate-
I know it's a real stab in the, plus you're going to have a pipe in the ground. We don't know where it's going to go. It's going to go to Dennis, it's going to go everywhere, so it's,
I can respond to that.
Okay,
one.
good.
I can respond to that one. So, a while back, when we first started looking at the sewer modeling, obviously, we're looking at putting a dry pipe in the ground from the town line between Harwich and Dennis to the bridge over the Herring River. Through the modeling, in the first light bulb moment I had is, I believe, a while back, Selectman Howell mentioned that he really wanted to look at the IMAs with the neighboring communities. So looking at this pipe on Route 28, and then we have Division Street right here between the town, Harwich and Dennis. Dennis is relatively dense development over there. So, what are they gonna do with this flow over here? Is there any opportunity for Dennis to push flow down this pipeline to offset the IMA that potentially Harwich may have in the future, pushing flow into Dennis? So I got all excited. We contacted the town of Dennis, and little did I know that he said, well, on Division Street from 28 South, we're not sewering that in their draft recommended sewering phasing plan. It's available online. And they were right. There's no color indicated over that. But they are sewering from 28 North on Division Street. So we are going to have a pipeline there. Through the modeling and the information that we've had and the conversations we've had with the town of Dennis, I am extremely confident that we have the information we need to both pitch and design the pipe and also size it appropriately for the future if Dennis does indeed want to connect to it. Again, we're talking a minimum 8-inch pipe size. It might be 10 or 12 inches. Probably wouldn't be more than that. And that's a minuscule cost per foot to upgrade from an 8-foot to a 12-foot. Same size trench, same everything. You're just paying a couple bucks more a foot for the actual material cost. So I'm very confident that we have the information we need to get that pipe in the ground. Last, I'll keep this quick. We did it about 15 years ago when they widened Route 132 in Hyannis right in front of our office. We put 3 dry pipes in the ground for the town of Barnstable. Those sat there for about 10 years, but when the college finally did want to connect to the sewer treatment plant, boy, were they glad they had those pipes in the ground. And again, if we know we're going to do it, we can either do it now, and we can have a tremendous savings from the paving that Mass DOT is going to do to put it over all this, or we can wait probably 8 years. We can either save millions now, or we can pay millions more later.
okay. So the tilt, because that was brought up by someone else, is going to go towards Dennis.
Towards us. Towards Harwich.
Oh,
So right
towards
now, we have a
Harwich.
main going down Division, and I'm happy to share the model and show the details
so
for another
towards
discussion.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Mary, motion on Article 4?
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 4, fund costs related to Route 28 wastewater collection system design in the amount of $200,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded?
Funded
From
from
free cash.
free cash, sorry.
Thank you. And that was the second as well?
Yes.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, pass the wastewater collection stuff. So this one's related to...
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Create a wastewater special purpose stabilization fund, and the discussion on this is to create a fund to be used for wastewater infrastructure, and 25% of rooms excise tax collected by the town of Harwich would go into said fund. And I believe, based on the projected numbers, that equals about $350,000 a year under current collection from rooms tax. And that's based on the 4% that the town of Harwich gets. Any discussion on this one? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank you for sequencing it this way, because my fears were we're going to establish that we're approving a higher rooms rate without actually tacking on where it's going to go so that everybody knows first. But I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for the request. Anyone in the public have a discussion on this one? Don's not even moving. All right, Mary, go ahead.
I move that we accept and adopt Article 5, create a wastewater special purpose stabilization fund.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is create an affordable housing special purpose stabilization fund. 25% of the current rooms tax would be put into this fund as well. Again, that number should come out somewhere around 350,000 per year. And any discussion on this article?
None.
Nope.
Need a motion?
I move that we accept and adopt Article 6 to create an affordable housing special purpose stabilization fund.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and Don, I assume we got your questions dealt with.
Yeah, I just want to state it publicly, though, that it was 100% or less, because it's one of those things that people always ask eventually about, is it does 100% out, 100%'s in. We could build up to area and median income of 100%.
Okay. And I know you had mentioned 125 and the notes from the attorney where we can't do that without legislation.
May be able to flip a property and be able to still accomplish what we want to.
Thank you. Any discussion, public? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And where are we at now?
We're at rooms tax rate.
Okay, so the next one up is to amend the rooms tax rate from the current 4% to 6% to take effect January 1st, 2023. Any discussion on this one? Anyone in the public? Board? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would note, again, just based on what I just said earlier, that the way this is sequenced now, by the time this gets voted on, up or down, we will have already determined as a town where that money is going to go to. So it's not just going to get dumped into general revenues and spent out each year.
Thank you. Did you make a motion on that?
I did not. I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 7, amending the rooms tax rate from 4 to 6% to take effect on January 1st, 2023.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next one is fund non-union
Chairman, if I
personnel
may.
wage increase.
Sorry, I'm assuming these are all 4 zeros.
4 zeros,
Thank you.
sorry. All except for the,
Thank you, I did have that
The
one.
3-1.
3-1.
yeah.
That was Article 3.
Fund non-union personnel, we voted to put this in the warrant last week. We now have a number in there, which is $39,843. But this is to fund non-union personnel covered under personal services contracts. Joe, do you want to just give a brief description of what that is?
So you'll see there, it says personal services contract and/or the personnel bylaws. I believe the figure you see there reflects personnel bylaw only. Personal services are your town administrator, finance director, police chief, fire chief. So that is contemplated in there. The dollar amount does not reflect that. That would be personnel bylaw only.
And on this one, we had an option on funding, which was raise and appropriate, which would be offset by FY 2022 estimated revenues of the rooms tax, or pay for it by free cash, and that's a conversation the board did not have. Don?
No strong feelings on it right now.
Mary?
I would use free cash.
Larry?
Yeah, when I looked at this, I was a little concerned about the timing, because we're talking about percent going into affordable housing and the wastewater. We have to be careful that we don't violate our own, those were the paths that we stick with those warrant articles, and this doesn't impede onto those if we tap into those funds. So that's my only concern.
So you'd be more apt to support free cash. I did ask
I would
Carol,
be
and I
more
won't
apt
speak
to-
for her, but she said she didn't have a preference. Do you have a preference now?
Good evening. So I did not estimate revenue with regard to short-term rental tax for FY '22, and therefore you will have surplus revenue, but certainly it makes no difference to me, however you choose to fund it, if you choose to.
Mary, you're reading the motions. I'll leave the funding source up to you.
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 8, fund non-union personnel wage increases in the amount of $39,843 from free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
Next is fund negotiated contract with the firefighters union. which is in the amount of $86,957, and the funding source can go either way. Any discussion from the board? Mary, we'll leave this one up to you too.
Okay. I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 9, Fund Negotiated Contract with Firefighters in the amount of $86,957 from free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0. Next is fund negotiated contract with the water department in the amount of $38,245. Same rules. And Mary, we'll leave this one up to you as
Okay.
well.
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 10, Fund Negotiated Contract, Water Department in the amount of $38,245 from free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next one is transfer of surplus bond proceeds in the amount of $219,894.56. Discussion from the board. Mary?
No, I don't have any further
Don?
discussion.
Nope.
Larry?
No.
Mary, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 11, transfer of surplus bond proceeds in the amount of $219,894.56 to pay the cost of acquiring the fire quint apparatus.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from anybody?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, hold on one second. We do have some discussion, so I will take a revote.
Hi, Dale Kennedy, Harwich Port, also Finance Committee. So we appropriated money for the Quint about a year ago. Can anybody explain what this money is for?
Sure. Carol?
At the previous town meeting, the town voted to appropriate funds to borrow to purchase a fire apparatus called a quint. And this would reduce the amount of borrowings from $1,086,000 to down $219,000 because because the Fire Station 2, the construction of Fire Station 2 came in well under budget, and those funds had already been borrowed. So we need to transfer those funds to another project.
Good, Dale? Yep. Great. Don?
Never leave this opportunity get away. Just to remind everybody what she just said, the fire building came in under budget.
Thank you, Don. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next up is land taking by eminent domain. Our last discussion was it's related to a parcel on Pleasant Lake Ave, also known as Route 124, identified as Assessor's Map 82, Parcel R5. And this would be with an estimated cost of $25,000 out of free cash. And the description, more accurate description of the property is across from the Park and Ride, the land that the town just purchased through its housing trust, which was also known as the Marceline property. There's a small piece of land, it's not small, it's 2 acres, in between the land that we just purchased. It is not accessible. It is locked in between what we just purchased, and the titles are an absolute mess. It is owner's unknown land. So this is a request for town meeting to allow us to take it by eminent domain for affordable housing purposes. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And speaking on behalf of the trust, we had always contemplated the purchase of the Marceline property being in conjunction with this because it bisects the 2 major parcels, which would create a unfettered, basically 15-plus acres to be able to develop.
Thank you. Questions? Any other questions from the board? Questions from the public? Mary?
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 12, land taking by eminent domain. Do I need to describe that?
Just add the Pleasant Lake.
Pleasant Lake Ave, Route 124, identified as Assessor Map 82, Parcel R5.
Perfect.
For an estimated cost of $25,000, funded from free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Next up is the ambulance. Purchase and equip a fire department ambulance, $378,676. Also to be paid for out of free cash. Chief, if you wouldn't mind, a brief explanation of why we're doing this now and not at the annual, related to how long it's going to take us to get this thing.
Sure. Chief Blank, the reason I brought this forward was everybody's aware with the pandemic of the microchip shortage that's caused GM to shut down their plants. Ford has shut down, or has millions of trucks or thousands of trucks sitting on the lot literally waiting for chips. So with that, the estimated time to build an ambulance has gone from 8 months to well over a year. We can't predict what it'll be, and we replace the ambulances every other year. This would put the ambulance replacement, we bought one in September, put it out almost to 3 years. It was 2 years and change, which really then creates just a domino effect with every other ambulance we have to replace after that. The other thing, it's a savings of about $4,000 projected because it's a $2,000 a quarter price increase anticipated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Board discussion?
No.
Anyone in the public have any comments? Can I get a motion?
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 13, purchase and equip a fire department ambulance in the amount of $378,676, funding from free cash.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe. Next up is the last, fund prior year's unpaid bills. This is a customary article at the annual. The amount is $8,085.33. Discussion from the board? Anyone in the public have anything? Linda?
I move that
Hold
we...
on one second.
Oh,
No, go ahead, Linda. I know I said your name, but please state it for the record.
Sure, Linda Sabula. A question, which is, how much free cash before all of this, and I apologize if this was answered, I came in late to the meeting. How much free cash did we start all of this with?
We have, we did not announce it at the beginning of the meeting, but we did start with roughly 6.3 million.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Joe?
Mr. Chairman, we are aware that there may be a few scatterings of bills. The dollar amount may increase. We don't expect it to be significant, but we'll endeavor to get that done for your final vote to close the warrant next week.
Thank you, Joe. Go ahead, Mary.
I move that we vote to accept and adopt Article 14 to fund prior year's unpaid bills in the amount of $8,085.33.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
I would just note that this includes you already $8.98, so it's pretty detailed.
Baskin's Hardware. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe. Joe, what other action on the warrant do you need tonight?
This evening, none, but I would just like to update the board and everyone present. So later this evening, this will be updated to reflect the actions of the board, and numbering will be added so that in the morning it can be transmitted directly to Mr. Churi from the board through the administrator to the Finance Committee. As you may know, I will refer to it as a quirk in the charter, whereby the board could do these things in mutual meeting for annual meetings. The Finance Committee is expressly prohibited from joining you in this meeting. So they'll be having a similar meeting of their own Thursday evening, which, the 16th, am I getting the date right? Slow down, Joe. September 16th, and it's hoped that the Finance Committee would then make their recommendations, that I can then record that and bring it back to the board. Looking to have the board be in the position to finalize, close the warrant, and sign it next Monday, the 20th, to give us ample time to meet the requirements for posting, and then we'll begin the work on the motions themselves.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. And with the board's indulgence, I'd like to take I and J ahead of F, G, and H, allowing us the end of the meeting to discuss housing.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I will bring up I first. Discussion on the procurement process. As you all know, we received a letter from Brooks Free Library Board of Trustees regarding the new procurement process. Joe, I think I'm just going to start with you on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Excuse me. Regarding the aforementioned charter, if you read Chapter 4 of the charter, which is responsibilities of the town administrator, under Section 3, duties of the administrator, on the Clause 4-3-2 and Subclause I, it reads as follows, that the town administrator shall be responsible for the purchasing of services, supplies, materials, and equipment for all town divisions, departments, and offices, excepting for those for the water department and for the Brooks Free Library. The town administrator shall execute all contracts for goods and services on behalf of the divisions and the departments under the jurisdiction of the town administrator, subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen may delegate its approval authority to the town administrator for certain classes of contracts. What that means is there is a separation because those two areas that are referenced are represented by also duly elected board members. Having said that, administration has and remains in partnership with all departments that seek information, assistance, or direction on procurement. So the charter prohibits me from doing it, but it does not prevent me from collaborating with them, and that's how we've been doing it.
So our intent would be to continue to collaborate.
Absolutely.
And I think, Joe, based on other conversations we've had, you are putting more emphasis on having department heads take the lead on their projects and do some of the follow-through on their projects, not
That's correct.
necessarily the technical side of it, i.e. Brooks Park lighting. We wouldn't require Eric to be an electrical engineer and have those conversations.
Correct.
So could you just outline a little bit of what you're doing to try and fill some of the gaps in the procurement that we have?
Sure. As you've indicated, and I will add, nor are the assistant town administrator or I electrical engineers, and our town engineer at the time also indicated he was not. So in those instances, administration takes the lead. I have a line item called Other Professional Technical Services that has some modest funding, if it was not already incorporated into the department's procurement, to seek an electrical engineer. So we presently have an electrical engineering firm represented by Kevin Murphy that we've used, for example, White House Field, but also Brooks Park lighting and things like that. But as you said earlier, Mr. Chairman, yes, Megan and I have worked with our department heads. They, as they do, take it up with professionalism, because they understand that department head is not only a subject matter expert in their department, but also has a leadership responsibility for budget management, personnel management, and procurement management. And so most often how that manifests itself is the department head identifies that they've had an article or budget line item that allows for the funding source. They describe the service or the supply that they're looking to purchase. That's presented in a pre-filled form where they tell us that. Us, in that case, is myself and the finance director. So I review it to make sure it comports with Chapter 30B. Carol makes sure that the funding is in fact there. We then give them authorization to proceed. They, in most cases, they seek 3 quotes and they select the best quote, and we go from there, where administration provides the contract. If it's $50,000 and under, as you know, I've been signing it with the finance director confirming funding. Otherwise, it goes to the board with a memorandum from me or Megan saying, there is funding, this is appropriate, please approve.
Thank you.
And there it is.
Questions or comments from the board? Larry?
Sure. My comment is that a few years ago, I think we, in some ways, we lost our way. The procurement, the needs of the departments were driven by the top-down approach, and I think when we talked, I know Joe, a couple years ago at least, it seemed to make more sense for the department heads to be to identify their needs, because they're department heads, and then bring it to the town minister, assistant town minister, as Joe described, to get it done. But to be the the initial driver is to be the department heads and try to bring it from bottom up rather than top down. So I appreciate that approach.
Thank you, Larry. Mary?
I'm just puzzled, Joe, from the letter that was signed by all of the library trustees. It didn't really make sense to me. Is this something new?
This is the first I've seen of the letter and am aware of that thought process.
Yeah.
And again, for me, the conversation would have been just as I did it this evening. I can't change charter. There's a process by which the charter can be changed. The reference that I read from was amended, some portion of that was amended by an article at town meeting in May of 2016. So it's always occurred to me that the town changed that charter reference somehow to indicate that the administrator must be responsible for all matters that fall under the board and should not be responsible for matters that fall under other political entities. I think the good news is we have a robust and active bylaw charter review committee, and I think that would be the place where this would go if that's what we're looking to have happen.
Mary?
But no department head is left astray or asunder where they're on their own. It's impractical. It led to the backlogs that we saw before, and administration, I'm proud to say, is very much active in our partnership.
If I can just clarify what I think I heard, but I want to make sure I've got it straight. You're looking for the library to come to you and say, I don't know, they need a new furnace, whatever their project is. But you would then assist them in drafting the appropriate language to create a bid?
Correct, no different than we do for departments under my
Okay.
purview.
But the point is, they initiate the idea.
In every instance, I would say, for the most part, that all department heads are doing that, as we create these articles for town meeting. But the specific point related to this letter is that this is not something that I'm foisting upon somebody, but I am expressly prohibited by charter from taking on those responsibilities that I'm going to say that our wastewater superintendent presently has, as is indicated by charter, as does our library director.
Okay, thank you.
That's not to say it couldn't change, but I do not have the authority to change charter.
Thanks.
Don?
Well, since Joanne has been standing at the back of the room, I'm really more interested in hearing from her before I say anything.
Gotcha. Joanne?
Hi, I'm Joanne Brown, and I'm chair of the library trustees. I've been in this, I was the chair when I began 16 years ago, and every meeting that we had was a discussion about the problems with the furnace, the problems with the lighting, the problems with the air conditioning, the problems with the fire alarm, the smoke alarms, things going off inappropriate at wrong times, and there being no way of helping. One of the things that I started out with was trying to help Ginny plug away at this, and the rest of the trustees have done that. One thing that I'll mention is that when the library had been remodeled and rebuilt, that there were citizens in charge of overseeing the signing off on this building, and that there were air handlers within the vents that we found out 8 years later had not been unwrapped and were not functioning properly. Ginny is a library director. It was said at one of the finance committees that she should be an expert at the electrical systems, in the climate control systems, and everything else in the library, which she found overwhelming. When Sean Libby came and took over the facilities management, we have finally gotten the library to be functioning better physically. There are still problems. But Ginny is not in charge, does not she has had the course in procurement. But she can't say where things, how the electrical problems need to be fixed, how the furnace needs to be fixed, and how the lighting needs to be taken care of. The library trustees are not experts in that area either. We can say that something needs to be help, we need help with someone, but even when we had a town engineer, we received very little assistance. Jeannie Wheeler and I have tried to be the facility, the Building and Grounds Committee, and it was like pulling teeth to get anything done. I don't understand why, after things have finally settled down, we have to take over this role again.
Joe?
Thank you. What I was speaking to is Chapter 30B, General Procurement, Supplies and Services. I was not aware that this discussion relates to facilities. Facilities management remains with DPW. They remain under Lincoln Hooper's supervision and my direction.
But the way that was worded, it sounds like it's all thrown back.
That's not the case. And if I'm not aware presently that there are facilities issues going on. However, I can get to the bottom of that immediately. That is not something that we rely upon any department head for, and we do rely upon our DPW and facilities management team. We would look to partner with Ginny for her to help tell us when she thinks things could be done around the programs. But with regard to procurement for facilities management, no. Building maintenance, building things like, building items do not go through department heads. So I'm going to need to research this further. That's not what I was made aware of. So I will seek to get that to be discontinued. Ginny is not responsible, nor is any department head specifically for ensuring that the buildings are maintained. That's why we have our facilities department, and the facilities department is supported by administration and procurement.
Thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's why I wanted Joanne to speak first. I have the benefit of being around this place for over 20 years in this role. And what she's speaking to was something that was occurring broadly throughout the entire government in the early 2000s. The management style was, you got a problem with your phone system, it's your problem. You got a problem with the heat system, it's your problem. You got a problem with the roof, it's your problem. And it took years to get a Sean Libby and an actual maintenance department together. I think the fear was that with this statement, we're going to go back and everybody's going to be held accountable for running. I remember saying at the time, there's no way that you can ask somebody who's a program expert in doing A or B or C to become a building manager, because they're essentially tenants in their building. They're not really hired to have an expertise in HVAC or alarm systems. So that's where this is coming from, because long before you arrived, everybody, that was the management style. It's like, well, you're going to be better with managing your budget because we're going to hold you responsible for everything relating to the building. It was more of a punishment than a help.
Linda?
Linda Sabula, I also sit on the Board of Trustees for Brooks Library. I'm grateful for this conversation because we were confused and concerned that Ginny was going to be asked again to be the electrical engineer on a project, or that she was going to be the one being on the scaffolding looking at whether or not the roofing tiles were being replaced properly. We have no issue with department heads, our department head, buying supplies, chairs, tables, equipment, books. That's what she should be doing. But I am thankful for this discussion that she is not going to be asked to be the engineer, that she is not going to be asked to be the contractor, and she is not going to be asked to be writing RFPs and doing contract maintenance, contract management, etc. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll get to the bottom of the problems.
Sure, if I could say that it's never been this administration's effort to have any employee do that. First and foremost, it's illegal. What was just talked about in every instance is construction and building maintenance. That's why this board was asked, and we had a member serve on the designer selection. It's incumbent upon the town to procure and hire those individuals. So there are no department heads that are on scaffolding. If they are, they're trespassing. They're doing something they shouldn't. That's not how the procurement process works.
Okay.
The process that I outlined is strictly for Mass General Laws, Chapter 30B, Supplies and Services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all set. Status of requests for proposals, Joe, we just need a brief status and we'll bring this back, but Bank Street, Bell's Neck, and Willow Street.
So you should have in front of you, we received a memorandum from the Director of Public Works. You can see that the bid opening for 5 Bell's Neck Road, AKA the West Harwich Schoolhouse, the bid opening was scheduled for September 9th, 2021 at 2 p.m. Link Hooper, DPW Director, along with Sean Libby, Facilities Maintenance Manager, received the bids that had been received. There was one bid. The bid opening was concluded at 2:06 p.m. The bid opening procedure began at 2:02. It was concluded at 2:06. And there was a sole bid from Historic West Harwich Schoolhouse LLC in the amount of $1. As Chief Procurement Officer, I am availing myself of the opportunity to evaluate that and make recommendations to the board as to what the next steps would be. But that is the net result of that RFP.
Joe,
One
before
response.
before we go on to that, I did send the RFP out to the board to look at what the RFP said and to kind of dive into why we got one response from it. So I'm going to put this back on the agenda for next week to have a more deep dive into this. But I hope that this board will reject that proposal. And I hope that you will reject that proposal and that we can look at the RFP process to figure out how we can get into. I talked to several realtors and contractors today, and quite frankly, as a housing project, that is going to do a lot more than what we put out. So, and we have to maintain the historic facade. I get it. It's been debated for years, but $1 with the I'm sure CPC request that will come in for the next 5 or 6 years is not going to give the town anything, and it's going to cost us a lot.
Based on the information, based on the information presently available, that's the recommendation I'm leaning towards. The town has a fiduciary responsibility, and that doesn't meet it.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For bringing this back, I just would like you to refer back, because there had been an RFP that Hesh wound up winning about 18 years ago, 17 years ago. And while there's been a vast amount of attenuation, there used to be a dry cleaner in Dennis, and it was underground water flow with toluol and benzene and a bunch of other things that were there. There was enough of a level where it was a concern for full-time residency, living in a building, but not enough so that if you wanted to do programmatic stuff for periods of time during the day, I urge you to make sure that you get a hold of that and see what the status of it is right now.
Joe, there's test wells. We've done extensive work on this over the past 7 years, and all the test wells show that plume has moved. So
Yeah, I was going to say.
we've gone way beyond the
Yeah.
17 or 18-year dry cleaner spill. It's those test wells all show that it is not coming up there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure, because there was a delineation between full-time residency and just using it during the day, and I want to make sure that that's where we're at.
Yep.
Yep. I'm trying to think, I may even have some of those reports still that Michael refers to, but I'm not sure.
All right, let's bump on to the next two.
So with regard to Bank Street, I have not had a status update yet, but we had Surveyor Paul Sweetser under contract. We need a definitive determination as to whether there needs to be a wetland. Once that's done, that dictates the next steps for the RFP. And if memory serves correctly, I believe that was contemplated to be done the middle of this month, so I would imagine something this week.
Thank you, Joe.
And then 70, I assume the reference is to 70 Willow Street. So as the board may recall, or a majority of the board, you voted a year ago to agree to a boundary change that was recorded with the Registry of Deeds. We have proof of that. I'm just now evaluating whether it has to be re-offered as surplus before we can actually dispose of it. And if that's the case, it'll come back before the board for that purpose.
Time frame on that, Joe?
I can say by the end of the month, the last meeting of the month for sure.
Thank you. All right, we'll jump back up to housing, and I would just say to the board, given the hour, I will put this back on the agenda next week, but let's have a conversation now for those that came. But the intent was to do more of a deep dive in it, and I'm not sure, given the hour and the fact that we have to go back into executive session, that we're gonna be able to give it its full justice. And the wastewater conversation articles, obviously, we needed to give that the time that the public wanted, which took a lot longer than I had thought it would take. So we'll start with housing. And Don, if we could, we'll start with you. And F it was put on there broad for a reason. I would just ask you for an update on the Affordable Housing Trust. I know you had a meeting. Can you just give us an overview of where you're at with the Affordable Housing Trust?
Yeah, we discussed at length our problems with having a housing coordinator as a contractor, and what that has meant to staff support over the last year and a half. And we were all in favor of moving on to an in-house strategy. But I appreciate Mary's time sitting down with the Housing Committee and getting that fired back up again and coming up with ideas. It really should work. I agree with her. This committee shouldn't be disbanded. It needs to work in concert along with the trust. The trust is something that came along recently. I just reviewed the legislation and be happier to have a deep dive next week into it. But I mean, there's definitely a place for this, and definitely the trust is not set up to create public awareness and public support for housing. It's a mechanism to do just what we did: buy some property, talk about plans to implement building something. But the Housing Committee, I will note that you took a look at even going back to 2001. I was involved with Sylvia Laffin in writing that original charge, and we at that time populated it with people, and I think that's the direction you were trying to go to again, with people that we knew that were capable of doing something in the housing community. Like my picks were Bob Murray and Dick Gomes and a few other people who had already shown success in doing something. So I think you're on the right track.
Thank you, Don. Mary, we will dive right into you then. What is the board? Why don't we tackle the Affordable Housing Trust Coordinator first? And I think this conversation has evolved. We had, what was the organization that's escaping me that did the last coordinator?
CDP.
CDP. So we've had CDP, and I think the board's commitment to affordable housing now warrants a more full-time or part-time but in-house employee. The Brewster model started at 19 hours a week, went to 25 hours a week. CPC pays for the coordinator and the town pays the benefits, which has gotten them somebody that, if you read the papers, has done an extensive amount of affordable housing. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in every article I read in the newspaper, Cape Cod Times or the Chronicle, related to housing, the misquotes from this board or the quotes from Jay Coburn about density and what other towns are doing and what Harwich is balking at. And I would say that at least 50% of it is wrong. But with that said, I think that we need to move in a direction that we have a dedicated person working on housing, not a person that we're getting from an organization that ultimately profits on large housing projects. So that would be, I'd like to go towards getting an employee. Mary, if you want to dive into where you've gotten.
The committee, not the committee, I got a group of people together, just kind of an ad hoc group to talk about housing. And frankly, over the last 4 months, I've talked to just about anybody that'll listen to me. I see one of them in the back row there about housing. I found a kindred spirit.
Not you, Cindy.
Elizabeth Harder, my kindred spirit. So the group that I got together were people that had already talked to me about housing, and we looked at, the Housing Committee just kind of disappeared due to feeling like they had no support and no direction for whatever reason, so they just stopped meeting because they didn't have anything to do. They very much would like to meet, and they set up who should be on that committee and what their charges should be. So that we should probably work on next week rather than play with that tonight. But I think there's some enthusiasm around it. I spent some time talking to Donna Kalanick, she's the assistant town manager in Brewster, and she just was a breath of fresh air. I'm gonna meet with her again this month. She said their motto is, it takes a village to build a village. And I think what they have that we seem to be lacking is having all the groups work together. The trust, the committee, and the authority, which are the state people, and anybody else who wants to help. But so that's where I'd like to go with this next week. I also had a great housing seminar, the Mass Municipal Association.
MSA?
I thought it was Mass Housing Partnership.
MHP?
No, it was
I don't
either
know who they
MSA, it was 4 women on the call that did. I did that one, I did that.
Did you
so,
that as
yeah.
well? And they were quite compelling. One woman talked about the secret sauce of what makes housing work, so I liked her right away. And some of it we've got, but the ones I think we're missing is consensus on goals. We know we want housing, but, my leader here doesn't want density. I think if we're gonna make any action work, we need some density. We could debate what the numbers of density are. Bringing in outside technical support and strong partnership. I don't think we've all been on the same page. So that's my 10 cents view for
Thank you, Mary.
tonight.
Thank you, Mary. And I would say that I do like density if it benefits the town of Harwich. These 40B projects with 92
Right.
units where we get 20% make absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And controlling our own destiny is something that we've talked about. And I think that we have the tools to control our own density and our own future, not have 40B law, an antiquated law, continue to just put large housing projects and give us very little benefit.
And I agree.
So, Larry?
I have nothing to add to that. I'll wait to the other.
Do we want to, the Housing Trust Coordinator, I think, is really where this all begins.
Oh, and one more thing, the housing ad hoc group was totally in agreement with that a housing coordinator should be employed by the town and should report to the administrator or his designee.
Don?
The only thing that concerns me about that, that was a concerning issue, in that it's similar to what a planner or the conservation agent is. I can see the day-to-day management being that, but it has to be responsive to the policy that's coming out of the trust, actually, because that's how it was sold originally. If you look at the original article that was adopted, it clearly speaks to, and so does the state legislation, to the part-time housing coordinators being a resource for the trust. So the day-to-day management of it, I can totally agree, has to be funneled through organizational structure, but the policy dictates have to be, given by virtue of the board that it's working to assist.
Larry? Still have nothing to add?
I'm not sure what you said, Don.
Well, the town
you're
planner
saying
doesn't
that
take direction from the
It's
town.
administered from the town administrator, but by direction from the board, policy set by the board of directors.
Yeah.
By board of selectmen.
It's like the policy, the Board of Selectmen is a policy
Policy maker for everything else,
and the
yeah.
town administrator runs the town. This would be the same. The Housing Trust would create the policy, and the person would be administered. by
That's
the
what I'm
town.
driving at.
So it's no different than what we are.
What we already have, yeah. I'm with that.
Hi, Elizabeth Harder, Harwich, Chair of the Harwich Housing Authority. I do not agree that the coordinator position be solely under the aegis of the Affordable Housing Trust. What we need is an in-house coordinator who will work with the trust and my group and developers and anyone that has a good idea. I think it should be under the planning
But I think that's what
director.
Don just said.
No, Don just made it sound like the coordinator was going to do whatever the Affordable Housing Trust told the coordinator to do.
Policy would be set by the Housing Trust based on how that was voted at town meeting. That the day-to-day would be administered by the town administrator. That's what I heard.
That's exactly what I was driving at. The town planner doesn't get direction from either the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator for zoning changes, everything. Those come from the planning board. And so that there's two different types of management that are going on, policy management and day-to-day operations management. And just so you know, we made an explicit move at the last contract with the CDP to share the coordinator explicitly with other housing entities, and that never happened, despite the fact that we told them that they were available to the housing committee also for whatever it is that they needed to develop.
I think it might want to be discussed that the coordinator needs to be responsive to all interested parties, which includes the planning board and the zoning board and the housing authority.
And I agree, but what would your recommendation be under who that person answers to? Because that person can't answer to 5 different people.
No,
They need to
that
answer to
person
one.
should answer to Joe Powers.
Right. So,
Not to the Affordable Housing Trust.
So, do we want to take a stab, rather than kick this can down the
Yep.
road? A stab at procurement for that position, Joe, to bring back? Or do we want to have further conversation before we do that?
It's not a procurement, it's a hire.
Or a hire?
It's a hire, but I got to point out, it's a hire that's coming from the Housing Trust's money. No. Oh, yeah. That's exactly where it's coming. The CPC allocates that money to the Housing Trust. There is no budget ability for the Housing Committee.
But it was approved for a housing coordinator for all. It did not say just for the Housing Trust. You brought the article to us, but it did not say for the sole purpose of the Housing Trust. So the Housing Trust should not be the only person, the only entity that gets to approve who they hire. That's where we got into problems with using who's he what's us.
Just to clarify, you does not mean me. You plural. That was the then town administrator brought that to you. And I've been looking it over all day long, actually, in preparation for this. The town meeting article specifically called for a housing coordinator in conjunction with the creation of the Housing Trust.
Not the one we passed this summer that gave you $50,000. That position, the $50,000, is to go to a housing coordinator. It does not say a housing coordinator at the discretion of the Affordable Housing Trust.
All right, this seems simple to fix, and we're not going to debate it out tonight. So let's get the language of the articles that have, and the language that we're talking about in these agreements, and we'll bring it back for discussion next week. But I think the board needs to hurry up and hire a housing coordinator if we want to continue to move forward.
I think that we all agree on.
Joe?
Yes.
I agree with the statement and in concurrence with that. The charter talks about part-time personnel are the responsibility of the administrator. So to advertise for that position, I have the authority to do so. I can certainly run the position description, all of that, by the board before I do that. I work for the board. I will argue that there is a funding source available presently that does not require us to go to town meeting to fund that part-time position during the present fiscal year.
I like that.
Let's go.
So next week, with as much information as we can bring back, including what we just heard about the 50,000, the first one, and what Don's talking about what the trust says. Please. If we're good, we'll move on from this conversation for now,
For now.
till next week.
Yeah, Michael, I just have one comment after not saying anything. It'll be very brief.
You wanted to wait till last.
Yeah, well, because Don and I have talked about this many times. I'm still would like to have a clear roadmap of who does what to whom. Because we have the housing trust, the way we've set it up, the housing trust, turns out to be our endpoint. They're supposed to be our action people to get things done. And we as Board of Selectmen are setting overall policy for what we think they should be doing, and we turn it over to them. Underneath that, if you will, we have various committees that advise, bring in public comment, and that to some way gets to how we define this position of the our housing authority, of how they pull that together, because we're getting mixed around on who answers to whom, and it shouldn't be that complicated. We should be able to sort that out if we get this overall understanding again of who does what to whom, and we keep the goal in mind of trying to get this action out there. So I'd ask that when we put this together, that be clearly outlined so we all understand it, so we can move away from this debate of who's doing what.
You got that, Joe? Thank you. Okay, moving on to the town administrator's report.
Just one update, or two updates very quickly. 2 contracts that were executed. The first is a contract in the amount of $18,162. It was awarded to Northeast Rescue Systems, and the gear is structural firefighting gear for our fire department. There is an agreement with Park Street Playgrounds LLC for $24,084.32 for Park Street Playgrounds LLC for performing all work and necessary services to provide the town with playground equipment. And this again is the community playground that will be contained at Harwich Elementary. So progress also being made on that front. There was a contract with Woodward and Curran, who presently provide services. We've continued their contract for the town for municipal storm sewer system engineering services. This was a contract that was first identified by our town engineer. It has been extended for an additional year, $47,000 for that purpose. And the funding has been confirmed through our finance director. And essentially with that one, the board may recall, they make sure that the town is in all compliance with all of the annual reporting. So they write the reports, they vet the reports, and they submit the reports on our behalf to the state, so that we remain in compliance with the MS4 Storm Sewer Water System Engineering Services. And that's it.
Thank you, Joe. Selectmen's report, Don?
Michael, may I just ask the question of Joe, what's concerning the playground, the community playground, what's the estimated completion date for that?
So we don't have an estimated completion date yet. The update that we gave earlier this summer, when we finally received the additional funding that we needed to take the next steps, it was agreed that the first thing we should do is obtain the equipment. We're still trying to ascertain whether we can begin a build in the fall, or if there's not sufficient time to do that. If not, it would be a build in the spring. But having a majority of the equipment is critical to that end. So I don't want to get any young hopes up yet, but we are edging closer and closer to the community playground at that location.
Thank you, Joe. Selectmen's report, Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oddly enough, it's about housing. The Housing Trust wanted to extend an invitation to both the CPC and the Board of Selectmen, which means that everybody's got a cross post, to try to get everybody out to take a walk on the recently purchased Marsline property, get a grasp of what it really is. We were hoping to try to put that together for September 22nd, which is a week from this Wednesday, at sometime early afternoon.
So if the board members could email staff and say whether they're available or not, we could kind of get together a posting if we are available.
It's hard to get a grasp of that without actually
Is there-
walking it.
September 22nd, Don, is there a preferred time?
We were looking at sometime like 1 o'clock.
Joe?
Larry Brophy's got the key, so I have to give him a heads up.
With amendments that were initiated to the open meeting law 2010 and subsequent, there are exemptions on site visits. There's certain criteria that we have to establish, but staff will work with council on that to make sure that all those entities can engage in that, and that it's understood that it's a fact-finding, not a deliberating effort.
Thank you. So September 22nd at 1 o'clock, that's the ask, and if everyone could just confirm with the office that you'll be available.
I haven't talked to Dave Nixon yet, so I want to make sure that, because they were integral to the invitation.
Okay.
It was their money.
Mary?
Just a quick report. I've been meeting with my different committees I'm the liaison to, and I met with the Cultural Council last week, and got a request from them that we change the name of the marketplace at Saquatucket. Chris Banks, one of the artists, said that people are quite annoyed after they finally park and come over to find out they can't buy fish. They think the marketplace, because it's at the harbor, is fish. So what they suggested is we change it to Artisans Marketplace. I don't know how much work that is, but I promised I would pass that along.
There's got to be a committee.
Good news is they're closed for the season, so we have time to ruminate on that,
There you go.
and we'll all work on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope, that's
Larry?
it.
Nothing.
My just kudos to Cindy for the parade. I thought the parade was excellent, well-attended, and kudos to the DPW for the work that they've done in the hollow. Anyone that's gone by the hollow at Brooks
Looks
Park.
good.
Yeah.
It
Looks
looks
good.
pretty amazing after the tornado went through there and destroyed the whole thing. So they did an excellent job cleaning that up, and Joe, if you could pass that along.
I thought we could have used more fire trucks at the parade.
All right, so I would entertain a motion from the board to adjourn open session and return to executive session.
I move that we adjourn from open session and go back into executive session,
To resume.
to resume executive session.
With the understanding that you would only be coming out of, to open to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. We'll take about a 5-minute recess.